The wrecking yard is gonna make the kids alright. We're having all the fun until the day is done. The wrecking yard is gonna make the kids alright. We're having all the fun until the day is done. You won't know what hit you till the cows come in the yard. Come on down to the wrecking yard. The wrecking yard is gonna make the kids alright. We're having all the fun until the day is done. The wrecking yard is gonna make the kids alright. We're having all the fun until the day is done. You won't know what hit you till the cows come in the yard. Come on down to the wrecking yard.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Wrecking Yard. We're back from our long hiatus. I'm coming to you from our new multi-acre facility in Corn Valley with updated equipment. This is going to be the first of 3 podcasts that I gathered on my last podcast trip. There are originally going to be 6 of them, but 3 got canceled due to, well, 1 for timing, 1 for location, and 1 for fire. Hopefully I'll talk to these folks sometime in the future. I am going to be taking another podcast trip in April. I should be able to gather up some pretty good stuff. These episodes were recorded last summer, so there may be a little bit of historical time lag in the subject matter. This first one is with Dave Myers, who was a drummer for the Gizmos, a drummer for the Vulgar Boatmen, a drummer for several other bands in Indianapolis, as well as being an entrepreneur, owner of a chain of record shops, co-owner of legendary Indianapolis venue Crazy Owls, and one of my major musical mentors. When I used to ride with him to Gizmos practices, he was always playing something in the car that I'd never heard of, which of course, I was only 15, so I hadn't heard a lot. But he always had something really weird or interesting in there, and he was always really nice to me, even though I was probably kind of an irritating little shit. I was very much looking forward to talking to Dave, and if this conversation sounds like 2 people catching up, well, that's exactly what it is. I hope it's not too boring for some of you. I realize this may be more of interest to folks in Indiana than folks outside of Indiana, but hopefully the conversation will be lively enough to keep your attention. Anyway, I'd like to remind you that our theme song was provided to us by Tim Boykin, friend of the podcast, Tim Boykin of the Lolas. If you ever see any of their records or CDs, buy them. Here's my talk with Dave Myers. I'm doing a safety recording with my old microphone just in case there's an issue with this. I don't think there will be. We tested it before, but I lost a podcast with Klaus Fluoride because there was a technical issue with the mic and I didn't notice it.
So when are you talking to the guy from the Seeds?
Wednesday.
That's cool.
He has a ranch way up, like 2 hours northeast of San Francisco. So
that's way up there.
Yeah, but he said he has a huge room full of Seeds memorabilia, and he's the last one left.
Really?
Yeah, I mean they're all dead except for him. It's weird. The new Bruce Springsteen record has a song about him being the only surviving member of his first band. Yeah, which is weird. I mean, and with you now, I've talked to all the Gizmos except for, of course, Billy. And I at one point I had hoped to get at least 2 or 3 of them together because I figured that they would spur each other's memories. You know, but I guess Billy's diabetes just caught up with him. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
That was sad.
That was very sad.
He lived in California for a bit.
Yeah. And we used to have lunch.
Did he tell you about his background extra work? He didn't like it very much.
He didn't. He just was. He gave me these headshots that I've got somewhere.
Uh-huh.
That he paid big money, have these headshots done, and they're hilarious.
Oh, I'm sure.
They're hilarious because he's a cowboy. He's all these different.
He took it real seriously.
He took it really seriously.
Yeah.
He was like, people tell me I'm an interesting person, so I should do well out here.
Well, the first show that he
There are a lot of
worked on-
interesting people out here, Billy.
Yeah.
Not that you're not interesting,
Right.
but you may have to elbow people out of the way.
Well, his first job was with me. We were working on Thank You for Smoking.
Yeah.
And he didn't quite understand. I'm sure you've seen a movie set. A lot of people bring their own chairs,
Yeah.
because they like to get those foldable lawn chairs.
Yeah. Because you're there
Yeah, well, Billy,
doing nothing for
Billy
a
didn't
long
think
time.
he thought it was no big deal. He's just like, well, I'll just go sit in that chair over there. I was like, well, no, that belongs to somebody. He's like, that's okay. And he's like sitting in this guy's chair, reading, and this guy comes up and they get in an argument. Because Billy didn't understand that the chair belonged to this guy rather than the set.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's my chair.
And
No,
that-
really, my chair.
Yeah, and that
It was in my car, and I carried it in
Yes.
here. It's my chair.
Yeah, he kind of soured on the experience fairly quickly. I don't think he didn't stay here for very long, did he? He was like maybe a year, maybe?
No, it was longer than that.
Was it?
Yeah, because he had 3 jobs.
Well,
he kept getting fired. I mean, who comes to LA and within a week gets a $75,000 a year job?
Right.
That's rare, just to come out here on a wing and a prayer and land
Sure.
a $75,000 a year job. And but he fucked that up, by just being stupid, saying some sort of Nazi thing in front. He was working for a Jewish foundation.
Oh.
And then so he got another job because his accountants and numbers guys do all right out here. Got another job that paid pretty good. Got fired from that. And just you need to just tamp it down.
Well, he didn't really have a filter.
No,
He really
had
didn't.
no filter.
Yeah, just whatever was in there, it was coming out.
Yeah.
So, but he had a really nice living arrangement too. If I remember correctly, he had like a house behind someone else's bigger house, and he wasn't paying a lot for it compared to what I was paying, for an apartment.
Yeah.
So he came out here, and his housing was set. Although I got to say, I cannot really picture him sitting at a desk for like 8 or 9 hours at a time, just with numbers. I can't picture.
I had a hard time seeing that too, but I had a lot of respect for the fact that he came out here and he got a job in this short a period of time that paid, for LA a living wage.
Sure. Which ain't
the guy's it ain't easy.
Yeah. I did so much weird work when I was out here. Did I tell you about Bill Doggett?
Well, you said you were going to see him.
Well, I'm not going to because he doesn't live in LA anymore.
Oh.
But when I get home, I'm going to do a Zoom with him.
Yeah.
But he, when I first got here, I was looking for jobs, and I saw an ad. Some guy needed packing and shipping. His name was Bill Doggett. I was like, oh, okay, I've done that before. So I called him up, said, I've got a lot of experience packing and shipping. And then I said, by the way, did you know that and before I even got there, he goes, he was my uncle. I'm like, okay. And it turns out, there's 2 reasons I wanted to talk to him. One is because when Bill Doggett remarried in the 60s, his wife was like really religious, and she was very ashamed of the fact that he was a musician. So when he died, instead of giving all his stuff to the family, she threw it all away, like all of his
tchotchkes and souvenirs.
His history just got dumped in the
everything.
garbage. And nobody even knew it till like much later when they asked about it. She was like, no, I threw that stuff away. So, there's not a lot of information out there about the original Bill Doggett. But on top of that, this Bill Doggett is an expert, and I mean probably the preeminent expert in the United States on a form of music that I cannot say. But I'll tell you this, when I started the packing and shipping, he had a stack of sheet music from the early 1900s. You see where this is going?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he says, here, can you pack and ship these? And I look down, there's like this kid with a watermelon, and a corn cob, and stuff missing on his sleeves. And each one was more offensive than the last one.
Yeah.
But
It's race music.
well, that's what it was called at first, but nowadays I guess it's a genre, and that's what they call it.
Yeah.
And he just recently he had like a whole bunch of like anti-slavery pamphlets and newspapers and booklets from like the 1810s, 1820s.
Oh, geez.
This guy's some really, really massive historical stuff. So I was really hoping I could talk to him. The funny thing was is when I used to pack and ship for him, he never let me in his apartment. I never saw his apartment. He had me do it down in the laundry room of his apartment complex. So I always wondered if maybe like, he didn't want people to know what he had in there, or maybe he thought I was kind of a flake, which is fine. I get it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, I was listening to a Radio Lab podcast a couple of weeks ago, and it was about this guy named Harry Pace. Do you know who that is? He was like the first black person to own a record label. It was Black Swan Records. He was the very first one, and then after that petered out. He became a lawyer in Chicago and started going after neighborhood associations that had charters that wouldn't let landlords rent to black people.
Yeah.
And he won a bunch of those cases, and then he died. But the thing was, he was light-skinned, so he passed as white, and his family didn't want anyone to know different, so they threw away all of his stuff as well. And nobody knew about this Harry Pace fellow until just recently. Bill Doggett. They called up Bill Doggett, and he was like, "Oh yeah, Harry Pace. I got the blah 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 blah. He did this, he did that." But what happened was this family, or his family, had this picture on the wall of him, and they just would say, "Oh yeah, that's my grandpa. We don't know anything. We're Italian." They thought they were Italian. So on this podcast,
There you go.
Yeah, on this podcast, they called the family together. They said, "Hey, everybody get here, and so we got something to tell you about Grandpa." And they're like, "What?" He was black. Like, what?
What?
Yeah. And apparently one of the family members didn't take it so well. The rest of them were kind of like, well, huh. And then what little information they had, they told him about the record label and the lawyer and stuff. But yeah, his history's just gone because his family was afraid that people would find out he was black.
Yeah.
So Bill Doggett, I think, would be a real interesting person to mine for information.
Oh yeah.
But
So where does he live?
I don't know. I didn't ask him.
Oh.
I didn't want to ask him a bunch of questions.
Out there somewhere.
Yeah, vaguely.
The guy in the laundry room packing your shit.
I know, and I was like, dude, I went to some flea markets and helped you out. I mean, I know you remember me. And he did eventually. Yeah, I just figured that guy must have like a trove of information that I just would like to dig out of him without actually having to say it. So I'm going to do it when I get home. We're going to do it on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
It should be all right.
Well, it's good that there's bad content, but good that it's still around.
Right.
That it didn't get trashed because the family, he passes away and the family sees it and goes, holy shit.
But the thing is that I really wanted to ask him, and I will eventually, is that I cannot imagine having a hobby where you basically collect lots of things that insult you. It just seems to be like every once in a while, do you just go, okay, I just can't look at this anymore. I need a day or two to de-stress,
Right.
And I'm just, because
But I think he just has compartmentalized and objectificified.
Well, he has to.
So
You have to, because I mean this stuff.
It's just an object over here that.
Because this stuff that he had was just
really
so
bad.
Horrible. And the funny thing is I kind of knew before I met him. I kind of knew that stuff was out there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the thing I was Googling. I wasn't like looking up racist sheet music. I was I wonder if I can find some, I mean, it just, I knew it was out there, but didn't know anything about it. And then working for him, I just learned all this. Oh, they were just terrible.
Yeah.
I did Google them afterwards, and there's some horrible, horrible things out there. And he explained on the podcast he was on, he said that people don't quite understand just how big minstrelsy was back then. He said that, if you can take like the most popular band you can think of right now, minstrel singing was bigger back then. I mean, everybody did it.
Yeah.
And not only that, if you were black, you probably had to do it anyway because it was the only way you could get a job.
Yeah.
And I find that astounding. So I think I'm going to have a good conversation with him if I can keep him talking without him getting mad at me and hanging up.
Well, that's the fine art.
Well, one of the reasons I don't do them on the phone, I'd rather do them in person because, I can be kind of jokey. And if the other guy's not taking it well, I need to see.
Yeah, exactly. The body language will tell you to go, ooh, so maybe I should go this way.
Yeah. There's this podcast by this guy named Josh Adam Myers where he's taking all 500 songs from the Rolling Stone greatest 500 albums, and he's one a week, picks it, has a guest, they talk about the album and whatever. And he's always saying things like, I got the kaboogly in the schnoogly, like this. Well, he had Peter Asher on as a guest to talk about one of the Beatle records, and Peter Asher hated him. I mean, you could hear it out of his voice. He was like, he didn't say it, but you could tell he was thinking, how did I get into this?
Yeah,
this guy's an asshole. I can't believe I said yes. He was. He's like, so George Harrison, he was a biggly koogly boogly doogly. Peter Harrison was like going, why do you keep saying something? And a couple weeks later in the podcast, he came out and said, yeah, he said, Peter Asher hated my guts. Yeah. So we've already been going this whole time.
Oh.
I take.
Did I say anything?
No, I edit them when I get home. I take out all the ums, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I just cut them out. That way it flows better. But I got all sorts of questions for you because not only the Gizmo stuff, but I want to ask you record store questions too.
Oh.
Yeah. Because I mean, when we were just the right age. We were in that record buying age group, where we were going to all the stores all the time, and the record company was always our favorite. Partially because Dirty Mike was always really nice to us.
Yeah.
As opposed to Chris over a second time around who wasn't. Do you remember that guy?
Well, you got revenge on him.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Bob got revenge on me, so. Because, buying that store at the exact moment when CDs were starting to take over was not maybe the best idea.
Right.
Because
timing.
Nobody wanted their albums, and nobody wanted to buy other people's albums.
Right.
But they keep coming in.
Yeah.
And after you say, no, I don't need any albums for a while, they stop coming in, and then everything just kind of went.
Yeah.
And, retail. But when we used to, I used to get paid every 2 weeks. I'd go cash my check on Saturday. We would go to the record company, then we would go to a second time around, and sometimes we would go to Karma, but we usually didn't have any money left over by the time we did those first two.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we get those first two, and then we go to that Burger Chef in front of.
Right there.
Yeah, I would spend my entire check on that day,
Yeah.
and that way 2 more weeks to do it again. And he usually went with us. He was actually the one that discovered the record company for us.
Really?
Yeah, he went to the dentist across the street one day, and he came out and he goes, hey, there's a record store over there.
Record store.
Yeah, so he walked over and he bought Genesis, Spot the Pigeon EP.
Yeah.
Because back then, EPs were kind of weird, there wasn't a lot of them around, and then like Genesis, like 3 songs out on any album. Even I bought one eventually, but yeah, he came home and he goes, hey, I bought this across the street from my dentist.
Genesis, we'd get the imports.
Mm-hmm.
And Genesis would just it would sell like the equivalent of the Allman Brothers.
Oh yeah.
It was just crazy. And Fort Wayne was nutso for Genesis, and nobody could find Genesis records in Fort Wayne, so
Right.
they'd drive to Indiana.
Well, you guys always had the
We
best
went
imports.
to Fort Wayne and saw Genesis in concert
Uh-huh.
in some silly little building
Right.
where the 8-foot ceilings, and there, Peter Gabriel, his flower thing hit the ceiling. They had an 18-inch stage.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was crazy. But they were like, Genesis said, we're going to play Fort Wayne. We don't know what it is, but they're nuts for us at
Right.
Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Well, you know what I heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I guess Genesis didn't actually play Indianapolis for like a really long time.
Really long time.
Well, I heard what happened is that Sunshine Promotions pissed them off, and that's why they would just bypass Indianapolis when they would tour. And I tried to find at one point Genesis tour dates because I didn't want to be spreading lies if what I was saying wasn't true.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find. I mean, not until like the 80s, and which is weird because I was really big into Genesis for a short amount of time, right before the whole, punk explosion.
Yeah.
And I would have gone. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would have gone. They weren't the most popular band in the world, but they had a following.
They had a following.
Yeah.
It was very focused, and there was very concentrated. They had a following.
Yeah.
I mean, we imported Lamb Lies Down. So here's this 2 LP import. So
Right.
it was very expensive.
Right.
We couldn't keep it in stock, and we're kind of like, what the hell is going on?
Well, the first time me and Phil went to the record company, we went to the import section, and like I said, you guys had the best import section in town. And I remember Phil found 2 albums that had ex-members of URI Heap in them. Like, one of them was like Toe Fat. Remember Toe Fat?
Yeah.
And the other one was The Gods, one that had Ken Hensley in it, and he was freaking out. He was like, I never thought I would see these. I've been reading about URI Heap forever. But he only had money for one, so he had to choose which one, and he pick one, they put it down, he'd walk around, then he'd come back and he'd get the other one and switch it around. And so, yeah, I mean, the thing about imports is if you had a record collection and you wanted someone to be impressed with your record collection, you had to have some items in there that weren't quite so common in order to do it.
Yeah.
And what I used to really like is when the Gizmos practiced in lion's share.
Oh yeah.
And while I'm waiting, I got let loose, just to look around, and I'd see all this stuff that was sitting there that hadn't gotten to the stores yet. I used to do a lot of my shopping in your warehouse, that back in the potholes days. So,
I wasn't going to call you potholes.
Hardly anyone does except Alan Deck.
Really?
Alan Deck still does.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So okay. So let's start with the record company. You weren't the sole owner, were you? Did you have a partner?
Roger Hubbard and I were partners. I met Roger when I lived in Crawfordsville, Indiana, Wabash College. He was a townie, just this kind of wild guy.
Right.
And then he moved to Indianapolis and started Sun Jewelry in Broad Ripple, which was next to the Village Leathersmith. So Roger had the jewelry store, and then he did some things with the guy that owned Village Leathersmith. And I bought, before the record company, it was the Stone Balloon, and it was our wholesaler wanted to be in the retail business and put his girlfriend in charge. Found a space at 65th and College. Used to be a waterbed store called the Stone Balloon. The waterbed store went out of business. He got did the lease and put a record store in and said, I'm not going to change the sign.
Right.
Signs are expensive. And so it was the Stone Balloon when Roger and I was going to buy it from the wholesaler. And Roger said, I'll help you buy it. I'll put in money, you put in money, and we'll buy it. So Roger and I were partners.
Right. So the first store was in Broad Ripple?
Yeah.
And then you had several others, right?
One on Georgetown.
Okay. Yeah, that's one Monty used to work at.
And then one way south, almost Greenwood.
Right. Now, when you started them, was there any sort of intention of hey, Karma, we can do better than them, or did you just start it just because you wanted to start it and didn't really care about it?
I think the start was our wholesaler didn't sell to Karma, didn't like Karma, so I'm going to put a record store in Broad Ripple, and my girlfriend's going to run it,
right?
Which worked for about this long,
right?
So I think it was all on his part. It was Karma does really well. This will be good for my wholesale business. I need a retail outlet, and I don't think my customers will be pissed because I don't have anybody I'm selling to in Broad Ripple, in the north side of Indianapolis. He sold to Obadiah's. He sold to Wonderwall. He sold to everybody else but Karma.
Right.
So I'll put a store in Broad Ripple, and then we said we wanted to open another one, and he's like, well, that sounds great to me. I'll sell you more records.
Right.
And we want to open one down south. Well, I'll sell you more records. So, it was that kind of thing where we didn't have a plan. We didn't know that really.
Right.
There was no master plan. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we had a supplier that was saying, well, I think you ought to do that.
Right.
What a great idea.
Sure.
So,
well, now how did
off we went.
How did you ultimately end up having a warehouse of your own?
Well, that too was Roger. Roger was fearless.
Okay.
And we were both born a couple days apart in August. So we had this Leo kind of personality. So that's the whole lion share, that kind of thing. And he just thought, why don't we sell to ourselves? Why are we giving this guy business?
Exactly.
Why don't we do that? And then we have no plans to open a store in Bloomington or Lafayette or any Fort Wayne or anything like that. So we'll try and get business wholesale business that way. Then if anybody else wants to buy records, tapes, we'll sell incense, records and tapes and pipes and
Yes.
rolling papers and whatever. So we got the place out at Park 100 or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
And
I used to love going there. Every time there was a practice that I could go, I would just look at look at all these.
we, Gizmos, Randy, Randy King, and whatever band it was at the time.
Right.
Practiced there. Yeah, well, it was a great space.
Yeah, it was very handy because there are no neighbors to piss off.
Very handy in a essentially a commercial space. So yeah, no one's going to complain that at 9 o'clock at night you're playing too loud.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that was handy.
it was very handy.
Now, were the stores successful like right off the bat, or were there like thin
No.
times where
They did okay. I think I didn't know how to run a business.
I didn't either
So-
when I bought second time around. So
It's that kind of thing. And then Roger lost interest, sold to me. So all of a sudden I was the sole guy. I was kind of like, I don't really want to do this. I love selling records.
Right.
I don't like running the business, but I like the whole thing with records. So I was starting to lose my interest in music. It's becoming a commodity. And,
right.
Noel Gimbel had a guy, I think he was Noel Gimbel's lawyer. He was Sounds Unlimited out of Chicago. And his guy came down and said, well, I'll buy them. I'll buy the stores. So I sold the stores to him.
And they weren't around very much longer. Were they?
He was an out-of-town owner,
Right.
and I wasn't going to stick around.
Well, I kind of remember. I mean, I don't think I was privy to any details at the point, but I kind of remember around the time when the warehouse disappeared, and you seemed like a little distracted at the time.
Yeah.
Which I can certainly understand.
Well, yeah, I had a lot of my marriage wasn't going well. There was pandemonium on all fronts.
And plus, you were running a magazine, right?
I was
running a
magazine.
I mean, you were a busy dude. The one thing I remember.
Why?
I remember going into the record company when the Sex Pistols album came out overseas, and there was like a month or two gap between when it came out over there and when it came out over here.
Yeah.
And I can remember that day because I just walked in there, and there it was on the wall, and those bright colors.
Yeah.
And I just remember going, thank God for the record company, because I bought it immediately. I didn't even hesitate.
And we
were all waiting for it.
We had all the singles, when they were moving from label to label.
Yeah.
Because you would get kicked off.
Right.
We had all those, and
yeah, that's where I bought them. For a while, second time around was having like vibrator singles and Eater and like kind of weird stuff. But it just wasn't worth it. I'd go in there and I'd buy something and Chris would just be a total dick to me. And I'm just like, okay, now I can see it was probably an annoying little kid. I get that. But they have money too.
Well, that was the fun part. The customers were the fun part of the store.
Right.
That's what I meant by selling records. I loved selling records.
Oh, I did too. If somebody who was interesting or had the same taste as you or even didn't have the same taste as you but liked something else that you could learn from. I mean, it's, every once in a while you get like a jerk in there. But for the most part, I was pretty lucky that we had a steady stream of fairly nice people.
Yeah.
But one or two we had to kind of go like, well, you need to leave now.
Yeah, we have those, but Danny Heffernan.
Mm-hmm.
I think Danny had a fire and lost his record collection. There's a fire or a flood or something like that, but he lost his record collection, and he had an insurance claim. So he had some cash,
right?
But he was like, how do I do this? How do I try to recreate? Because there's probably stuff that's not available and things like that. And it was so much fun, like trying to rebuild his record collection within the confines of the insurance money.
Sure.
You sure you want to spend all this on records?
I would have.
Buy a motorcycle with some of this.
No, I was
But-
I was a total junkie. I mean, I would literally spend an entire paycheck in one day
Yeah,
because I didn't care if I was broke the next 2 weeks if it meant I had stuff to listen to.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and building a record collection back then was fun, you know, because
It was fun.
you'd look at it and you'd say, well, I need a couple more of that one, or I need that weird import version of this one, you know.
Yeah.
And if I had a time machine, I would go back and tell myself, look, the day is coming where you can listen to anything you want in the whole wide world for $10 a month. Don't buy so many records.
Yeah.
Put it in the bank. Buy stock in Apple. Do something, you know.
Yeah.
But I have only recently, say within the last 10 years or so, sort of backed away from ownership. I don't need to have a ton of CDs. I don't need to have a record collection.
Yeah.
I mean, I have the best record collection I've ever had right now on my phone.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And you know, people say, well, you know, the sound quality is not the same. And I'm like, well, you know, I'm 60. My ears aren't the same.
Because I hear that all the time, and I've gone through the friends that jumped on the Pono bandwagon,
Oh, yeah.
and they've gone from this to that to really get, and I'm kind of like, I still think the best sounding music that has affected me was Iggy, raw power, 8-track, in a car with the windows rolled up, because the cabin of
Right.
the car would just like, and that record was equalized all wacky. and
Real wacky.
It was very strange.
Even
But
after they fixed
worked
it was wacky.
in the car.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So I'm thinking, look, my hearing's, I have tinnitus, and
I do too.
so do you think I need? Well, look at my speakers.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I've got some Bluetooth speakers for my stereo that Dave Fulton gave me.
Yeah.
They work great. They sound fine.
they're
They're
fine.
right there. I don't need the inconvenience. And the other thing too is, I have a lot of books. I have a lot of books, really. But when you have a lot of books and a lot of records, you can't get anyone to help you move. You can't. I mean,
I would think not.
no, you can't. Because I used to, whenever I'd move, I'd call a bunch of people. Hey guys, on Saturday the 14th, I'm like everybody going, my aunt's coming to town that day. And
I got lumbago. I can't.
I said, well, free pizza and beer, and I'll
Yeah.
even throw some cash your way. And like, you still got all those albums? Yeah, my aunt's coming in. I can't do it.
Yeah.
So, but now I can take my entire record collection and it's in my pocket.
Yeah.
And it sounds fine.
Yeah.
In the car, I got 4 speakers in there. They sound fine. I got Sirius XM if I get lazy and just want to just punch a button and drive. I'm okay with technology now. I loved having a record collection. I loved having a CD collection.
Yeah.
But I'm past it now. I'm to the point now where I just want to move easily.
I'm going through that with a buddy of mine. In fact, I was at a lunch with him where we get together once a month and we have a music lunch. So and it started out, we would bring a grocery bag each of CDs. This is 25 years ago. And we'd swap them, Do you have Oh, I've got that. All right, well, how about this? And we do this all through the lunch, and then we talk about the last batch and what was good and what was bad and blah, blah, blah. And then it evolved to we would just swap USBs. Or we went through a brief cycle of we'd burn our own CDs. So you didn't have to lug around all the jewel box cases. You just had
zipper cases?
paper sleeves.
Oh, okay.
And so, what used to take up a shopping bag was like this.
Right.
Then it evolved into here's the USB and here's a list of what's on it, kind of thing. Now, and we're kind of at that awkward place where I just want to give him a list of music that he ought, if he's not streaming this music, he ought to listen to it.
Yep.
This is out, but he's still into that ownership thing because he's not sure where he's going to listen to it. So he's not sure he's going to be connected to the cloud at a particular place and want to listen to something, and he won't have access to it.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Well, I can understand that.
Yeah.
But you can. But at least with the one I have the Amazon one.
Yeah.
You can download.
I know. I use Amazon Music.
I love it. I really do. I know it's not cool to say that.
I know it's
I
not
love
cool
it.
to say that, but I'm the same way.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Amazon, the HD, for me,
Sounds
it's
good enough to
terrific.
me. Yeah. And the nice thing too is like, you know, I got a bunch of music nerds on my Facebook page, and so, you know, they're always going, hey, have you ever heard this? And I go, no, but I will in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
I go to Amazon, and there's not been one thing so far that I haven't been able to find.
I haven't found, I thought I had them stumped with the Hampton Grease Band, but
There it was.
there it was.
Yeah, yeah. I always got them mixed up with the Grease Band.
What a terrible two to mix up
Yeah,
together.
Yeah, but about the streaming stuff. Yeah, I've had no problem. This guy suggested that we should listen to this Red Simpson Truckers song album, and I'm like thinking, well, you know, okay, I'll check it out. And it was awesome. And I tried to buy one for him. I was going to give him one for Christmas. It was like $80 for the CD, and I'm like, well, you're getting something else.
Yeah, you're getting a pair of socks.
But it's a great record though, and what I've come to determine over the last few years, because I've listened to more country lately in the last few years than I used to, is that stuff from the '60s is produced so well.
Yeah.
I mean, especially like the Buck Owens stuff, where you got like Don Rich coming out over here and Buck coming out over here. I mean, that's those producers. I mean, they really knew what they were doing, and this Red Simpson album particularly is just produced to a T. And every song is a trucker song, which I never thought I gave a shit about. But they're really catchy.
Yeah.
I listen to them, I'm going, holy shit. That's pretty cool.
Catchy.
Yeah, and the guitar picking, I mean,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. But yeah, I got no problem with Amazon whatsoever.
Yeah.
So none at all. Now, when you were younger, like in your teenage years, before you bought like the record company and stuff, what were you listening to? Like what did you grow up loving?
Oh, well, early on, because I lived on the East Coast, so it was all Cameo Parkway stuff.
Right.
So, you know, the Orlons and all that dirty sounding stuff, like Gary U.S. Bonds and Joey D and the Starlighters.
Who had Joe Pesci as a member for a short amount of time.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Now I don't like them.
Well, I guess they were in a movie. They were in a Twist movie at some point.
Yeah, the Peppermint, because Peppermint
Yeah,
Twist.
and Joe Pesci is in that movie as
yeah.
a teenager. Yeah.
But, you know, it was kind of a lot of tenor and baritone sax, so, you know, it's just honking.
Right.
And kind of dirty sounding and hand claps and...
Now this is post Elvis, but pre Beatles on the Ed
This
Sullivan?
is, yeah. So this is like 62, 63.
Were you watching Ed Sullivan when
Yeah.
Elvis was on?
I was watching Ed Sullivan when Elvis was on, when the Beatles were on.
Do you remember your parents' reaction to Elvis? Or was there?
I don't, well, my dad was a drummer, so he sympathized
with that poor guy in the back?
Yeah, with
Elvis, get out of the way, I can't see
all
him.
that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, he was like, and he would always equivocate it to, well, we didn't do that, but we did this.
Uh-huh.
You know, like kind of like he was kind of understanding what they were trying to do. You know, these young guys out of high school or doing that. So that's what he did when he was, you know, in high school and coming out of high school.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's cool because I mean, you know, from when I've talked to other folks, a lot of their parents were not quite so understanding. Now,
I never got pushback from that.
Yeah, I never did either. My mom didn't give a crap what I listened to.
Yeah.
You know, my mom used to do an imitation of me buying a record. When we had friends come over, my mom would go, "Oh, my son, he listens to all this weird shit. Here, this is how he buys records. Watch." And then she'd go like, I've never heard of them. I don't know any of these songs. They look like junkies. I'll buy it.
I'll take it.
Yes, and my mom used to do that to people that come over to the house and stuff. And I'm like going, Mom, you know, and then she go, "Oh, I'll prove it. She like went and got the Dead Boys loud.
Oh yeah.
She's like, see what he buys.
Look at this album.
She didn't care. I mean, she was just like, I don't care what you listen to, but she just thought it was funny, you know. And I grew up in a house with no country music. No country music whatsoever.
Yeah.
My parents made fun of that hillbilly music. They just. So I grew up. And here's the thing. I think you remember this. Is there was a time when I really detested reggae, and and finally, when I had second time around, I said, you know what? I need to find out if I really hate this or not. And I gave you a couple of cassettes, and I said, here, make me like reggae music. And one of them, you just put, this is reggae music, the compilation.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean,
1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, the thing was, is I was already kind of getting into soul music at the time, so it was like the right time for me to hear it. And from that point on, I was just like, oh man, real quick. Let me tell you my Peter Tosh story. I was driving Uber, and I picked this guy up, and he's got Bermuda shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, and he's got sandals and stuff, and he jumps in my car, and he's like sweating like crazy. It looks like someone who's just done coke and heroin simultaneously while he was drinking. And he jumps in my car, and he goes, I'm coming in hot, like that. And I'm like,
don't puke in my car.
Oh, he wasn't quite that drunk yet, but I'm sure he was getting there. So at the time, I didn't have Bluetooth. That older car just had my phone plugged into a jack. And he pulls it out and plugs his phone in and starts playing some horrible crap. And he keeps saying, I'm coming in hot all night. I'm coming in hot, like that. And he had me take him to this place where everybody was in like tuxes and gowns and stuff. And he jumps out of my car up to the valley. He goes, I'm coming in hot. And he goes running in there. And he told me to wait because he said he was going to use me all night long. And I told the valet, I said, dude, just let me turn around and get out of here real quick. But what happened was on the ride.
Let me close him out.
Yeah, on the ride there, he gets a phone call. And since he's plugged into my car, I can hear it out of all the speakers. And it's his girlfriend, his wife or something. And they're talking. And he goes, hey, when I get home tonight, I'm going to touch your vagina. And she goes, whatever.
I'm coming in hot.
Well, that's the thing. So after that, I took that Peter Tosh song, Coming In Hot, and I put it on my iPod just in case I ever got that guy in my car again. Yeah.
Just let me get out of here.
Oh, I got Uber stories. You know, someday I could write a book just on my Uber stories alone. Because I met some weird, wild people and had some really weird experiences. I had cataracts a few years ago, and I was uninsured. I couldn't get them fixed, and I was working early morning shifts, so I took some Colt players to the practice facility, and I took this one guy there, and he goes, hey, just take me around the back here. And I'm like, okie dokie. So I take him around the back, and it turns out I drove over their practice field. And they complained to Uber, and I got like a little message or like, you should be more careful.
Don't drive over their practice field, okay? And, check this box.
Yeah. Well, and oddly enough, too, it was one of those times, it doesn't happen very often, but have you ever stopped at a stoplight, and for whatever reason, it's not changing, and you're like sitting there for a long time, and it's not changing. Finally, I told the guy, I said, look, dude, it's been like 10 minutes. I said, I'm going to just go when it's clear. And he reported that, too. I was just trying to get into practice on time. But anyway, so yeah, I got my cataracts fixed, and it turns out they were so bad that the doctor took pity on me. He was like, dude, he said, this is the worst one's ever seen. So they gave me free LASIK.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he said, I'm just going to do LASIK for free. He said, I feel sorry for you. And I was like,
well, you're set.
Yeah, I am. I only wear glasses to drive because I just a little bit of distance. Yeah. But even if I don't have them, I forget them, I'm fine. The problem is, of course, I like the way I look in glasses. I hate the way I look without them.
Well, you can get glasses that
I thought about it.
Regular.
Well, I could wear these around and they're fine. I just don't need them, Yeah. So, but I was. Have you ever had eye surgery?
No.
Well, see that look you just made? That's how I thought. I was just like, oh shit, they're gonna touch my eyeballs.
They're gonna touch my eyeballs.
Yeah, that freaks me out. I can't have. I could never have contact lenses because of it. And so I'm sitting in the chair. And the nurse is talking to me. She's saying, oh, here's the other thing, too. They usually do one eye at a time. They did both mine at the same time because I didn't have enough money to pay it, so they gave me a discount if I did them both at the same time.
You're gonna,
So
you pay us this much, we're doing the whole ball of wax and a little extra.
Yeah, and they have like this
while you're laying here.
They have like a row of chairs like a barber shop. And literally each operation only takes like 10 minutes, apparently. And so it's like, So I'm sitting there, and the nurse is going like, well, we got this thing here. How's you doing there? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, you can leave now. And I'm like, well, don't you have to do the
Don't you have to touch my eyes?
They did it. She said, we already did it. I said, when? Apparently, they claim they did not put me out. They said they just gave me whatever it is that makes you loopy enough to not remember what they did to your eyes. So I'm laying there, and I'm kind of like, a little bit. And my dad showed up, and my mom was already there, but my dad came down from Greenwood to see how I was. And the doctor says, "Oh, here comes your parents walking down the aisle here." And I said, "Well, it didn't work out very well the first time for them."
Loopy.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I had a zit on my nose, and the doctor says, "Hey, you might want to have that checked out." And I was like, "No, man, that's just the tacos I had last night talking." Oh, okay, so we can go back here.
I keep that in.
Yeah,
I
I
put
will.
the whole LASIK.
Yeah.
Because I didn't qualify for LASIK.
Oh, really? Well, all my family got it done.
They weren't bad enough.
Uh-huh.
Oh, you got the beginnings of cataracts. Oh, blah blah blah. We can fix it and it's permanent.
Right.
And I'm like, well, all right, I'm here.
Yeah.
Well, no, you're not ready yet.
So not bad enough, huh?
Yeah.
Well, he can tell you for about a year when I had him. I mean, I'd literally be sitting this close to a television watching a Pacer game. I could not see the numbers on their jerseys or what the score was or anything, and I was always asking him, "Well, what's the score?" So yeah, it was awesome though. I mean, the next day I'm looking around, I'm like, because the other thing too is, and I learned this later, that when you have this done, colors become
more vivid.
Yes, and they
heard that.
really do.
I think it's the greatest thing. I don't qualify, so.
All right, back to the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. So your dad was cool with Elvis on Ed Sullivan.
Yeah.
Was he in the room with the Beatles on Ed
Oh
Sullivan?
yeah, they kind of let us have our fun.
Uh-huh.
And that was when it was, I think 1963 was when I got my first drum set. And Ludwig's, had to be Ludwig's.
Sure, that's what mine was.
And I still have them. They're out in storage there. But, I couldn't afford drums, so my parents had to, I was 13.
Drums have always been expensive.
And so they had to do the financing
Right.
thing, and they did. So,
Now,
of course, I had to wax the car for like a year.
Sure.
But
Did you take lessons or were you
no,
self-taught?
I took lessons once when I was in 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't lessons. I was in drum class or music class or
Right.
something that you did where they were trying to teach me how to be a drummer, which was painful.
Right. Now, did you get the drums before you saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan or after?
I got the set of drums, the Ludwig lacquer set. I had a snare drum on a stand that kind of like a marching thing, but it was 5-inch, and I do these exercises in my bedroom.
Right.
The Beatles, I bought the drum set.
I see. Now, when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, did you already have the record?
Probably, well, maybe, but it was damn close.
Because I know there wasn't a lot of
Meet the
time
Beatles.
between.
I don't remember buying Meet the Beatles, but I remember buying England's newest hit makers.
Right.
That is very vivid. And I bought the monos.
Mm-hmm.
I was buying monos because they were $1 cheaper.
Yeah. Well, so I guess what I'm getting to is when the
$2
Beatles.
instead of $3.
Yeah, I remember when $5 just sounded like. My parents wouldn't buy me albums. They say you can buy a couple 45s, but albums are too expensive.
Yeah.
They're like $40.
Well, and my parents would say the same thing. What if you only like one of the songs?
Right. But this was
You
before.
could have bought the single.
This is before album culture because before the Beatles, albums were 2 songs you like and then a bunch of stuff that they did to fill it up.
Yeah.
So when the Beatles were coming on Ed Sullivan, did you know what to expect or did you just watch it cold?
Well, I had there was an article in Newsweek about this band in England,
Right.
And they're going to come to the States and this and that. So I read about them, so I knew about them. And then WIBG in Philadelphia, AM station in Philadelphia, was playing them like crazy, and they played on their first tour. They played New York. I think they played Atlantic City.
Okay.
And they drove. We lived in New Jersey, just east of Camden, so across the river from Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And they WIBG was the AM station that everybody listened to, and they said the Beatles are in Atlantic City and they're going to play in Philadelphia, and they're coming down Route 70, Marlton Pike, which was essentially how you got to Philadelphia from Atlantic City. So people would, and Marlton Pike was right in back of our house, across a field.
Right.
Kids would just go out and stand by the highway thinking that they'd see the Beatles.
Nice.
Yeah. Drive by in a black Cadillac, or something like that. But it was that kind of nutso. So yeah, people my age at the time were crazy about it.
Okay, so now after this, did your taste kind of veer off into another direction? I mean, were you all in on the British invasion, or were there?
Yeah, pretty much.
Even Freddie and the Dreamers.
Never owned a Freddie and the Dreamers, but never owned Jerry and the Pacemakers.
That's fine.
Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas. None of that. But I got into the. You either liked the Beatles or the Stones.
Right.
So it was like the West Side Story kind of thing.
See, what I don't understand is, I still to this day, people go, "Who do you like, the Beatles or the Stones?" And I love them both.
Yeah.
Well, you can't do that. I said, well, why not?
Yeah.
It's like when people say dogs or cats. I'm going, I like them both.
Yeah.
And it kind of upsets me when people want you to force to, pick a side. And I don't think there's a side. I think I love music, and I love the music that these two bands make. So I'm fine. I'm happy.
But I think when you're 12 and 13 and stuff like that, you get the Stones were very much. You didn't see the Stones in coats and ties very often.
Right.
In the magazines and on the covers.
Sure. Well, one thing
the Beatles were always, they looked like pretty well put together.
Yeah. Well, the thing I noticed, when I rewatched the Tammy show, I noticed that basically every band basically had uniforms.
Yeah.
Most of them anyway. But the thing about the Stones is they didn't have uniforms. They all dressed however they want, but somehow they looked like they were together.
Right.
You could tell they were together even though they weren't remotely dressed the same.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of cool actually.
Yeah, I actually think that's.
Yeah.
And Mimi always says too, through the ages, if you never could imagine liking a rock band where all their members are 80 years old. I mean, does that make any sense?
Yes.
But her point is, if there's any band that can pull off looking like rock stars and be 80 years old at the same time, it's the Rolling Stones.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
I don't know how they do it because they definitely look old.
Yeah.
Rode hard and put away wet.
Right. When I was a kid, I just assumed that when you reached like 20 or 25, you stopped liking rock music because everyone I knew who was older was listening to like Andy Williams and Ray Conniff, and I'm like going, is that what you have to listen to when you get older? And I was really worried. I was like, I really love this Yardbirds record. Am I not going to like it when I'm 20? And I got kind of scared about it.
That always, that's a good point because I always thought that when the family sat down for dinner, my dad had come home from work. My mom was the wife and the mother, 3 sons. Which we would literally have destroyed the house.
Right.
There was always somebody that was in a bathroom with a bloody nose because they got hit in the head with a rock. That was pretty much, and Dad would come home and go, "What's for dinner?" And how are the boys?
All right.
Where's my brother Bruce? Well, he's in the bathroom. Somebody threw a rock at him. But we'd sit down for dinner, and Dad would put on music, and we'd listen to music while we had dinner. And it was Julie London, it was Ray Conniff, it was Perry Como, something like that. So and he had a it was a record changer, so you'd stack the LPs and then it'd play the next one. So our joke was, the first one would be the Perry Como record. The next one we'd put the Rolling Stones in.
Right.
So the record would change.
Palate cleanser.
Yeah, the record would change, the needle would drop, and it'd be, what?
Right.
What is going on? You stop this. But I always thought, so am I going to be, so he was probably, if I was 13, my dad was 35.
which I'm sure at the time seemed like 70 to you.
Oh
right?
yeah. These are old people.
Well, my mom was in her 20s. I thought she was old.
Yeah.
You know?
The fact that mom and dad had, by the time my dad was 25, he had 3 sons. And my mom was a year younger.
Uh-huh.
So she's 24 and she's got 3 kids. I mean, really? Can you imagine doing that? I had trouble tying my shoes at 25.
My parents had me when they were 19.
Yeah.
And then
And
they
it's-
had my brother like 3 years later, boom.
Yeah.
And then they had my other brother 7 years later than that. So, yeah, I mean, we just, but yeah, I had kind of a different house. You may not remember this or not, but when the Gizmos went to New York and Buffalo and Boston, remember that? Remember, I was in that car, but that was during a school year. Remember, I should have been in school, and I asked my mom. I go, "Hey, Mom, the Gizmos are going on tour," and I think I might have fudged it a little bit. I might have said, like, hey, they're paying me like $20 a day, to lug stuff, and I'll be learning about sound systems. And she was like, "Okay." So she wrote a note to my principal. She says, "My son's going to be gone this week because he's studying sound systems on tour," or something like that. And they were like, "Okay." I mean, they were probably happy to get rid of me anyway. But yeah, so here I am, like, traveling with a punk band when I'm 17.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. And my parents were just like, "Yeah, I don't care. Do whatever. I don't care."
I can't imagine that have happened
I know.
in my household.
Well,
But I think that's so cool.
if Black Sabbath played on a school night, I go, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to go see Black Sabbath on Wednesday." She goes, "Yeah, well, fine, whatever."
But she saw you were in good hands on the tour,
Yeah, I mean,
you lived through it.
Well, I've said this to all the other Gizmos, and I just want to thank all of you for being so nice to me at the time. Because, I mean, look, I know that I was kind of an annoying little turd who was probably going off
You're the
about
best
nuggets.
roadie in the world.
And I talked about nuggets constantly because I remember when I bought it, I became obsessed with it. I'm like, "Oh, you guys have heard this, heard this." You guys are like going, "Yeah, I heard that on the radio when I was a kid," But everybody was really nice to me. And and that really kind of helped propel me a little further in the right direction,
So we were a good influence.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Oh,
obviously,
man.
I mean, it's you are solely responsible for my reggae stuff, solely. I've got another guy.
You be sure to tell Ellen Deck.
Oh, he knows. He knows. And because whenever Alan Deck would write about reggae, I didn't even read it. I was just like, I don't care about that shit. I just flipped it past. I was just seeing how many of mine were in there. Oh, Triumph, good. The Pillars of Fire. So.
Oh yeah.
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 But yeah. So anyway, before we talk about that tour, your plate was busy. You had the record stores, you had the warehouse, you had the magazine, and then what made you go? You know what? I'm not busy enough. Maybe I should start playing drums for a punk band that's an hour away.
I don't know why. I look back. I was thinking about that the other day. Why did I try to pack 40 pounds in a 20-pound bag?
Right.
Because I don't think I could do. I really believe you can't. You're not that good. Your skill set. I don't care who you are. There are very few people. Let's put it that way. That can do all of that kind of stuff and really give justice to each of those segments. I say that 50 years later.
Do you think maybe it was just the exuberance of youth telling you that you could do anything you want?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think that there was a period of time where, and it wasn't just me. There was a whole bunch of us.
Mm-hmm.
I'd include Steve Cohen, my buddy Roger Hubbard, and, a lot of people like that who we just thought, well, there's nothing we can't do. Roger Hubbard and I bought a hot air balloon. Hot air balloon, and we thought we could make money on it.
And
now, where's the business plan on that? Where's the path?
Right.
Who's done that before? We bought a hot air balloon, and Roger got his hot air balloon license. I did not, because I was, drumming in a punk band, or in between. Anthony Gerard, Tony Spike Barja, got his balloon pilot's license, and we had a rate card. We would go to businesses and tell them that we'd do nylon ripstop, their logo on it, Hubler Chevrolet,
Uh-huh.
for example. And we'd put that and we'd sail the balloon over Indianapolis.
Was there any money in that?
Well, no. Again, we thought we could do anything.
Sure.
This seems like a good idea. People will pay for this, won't they?
It was the same when I bought second time around. I thought, man, Bob's not running this place right. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to get this place smoking hot.
Yeah.
And then I got there and I'm like, what are these bills?
Yeah.
We have to pay. What's a property tax? I don't get it. And all of a sudden I realized that I'd just bitten off this huge chunk and I knew nothing.
There was this thing about, well, shit. We can learn. We learn by doing. We can and life is short.
Yeah.
Let's give it a whirl. Let's do this. Let's do that. I was in a band with Randy in Crawfordsville.
Now, was this pre-Gizmos or post-Gizmos?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
pre-Gizmos. This was 73.
Okay.
73 or 74. We bought a bus. we bought a band bus.
In the anticipation of touring?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to need this.
Yeah.
If we go anywhere, we're going to need it. And, heck with trailers and, 6 cars packed full of equipment. We'll just put everything on the bus. It's got bunk beds. It was outfitted. What a bus.
Right.
How are we going to, we...
Did you ever go anywhere in it?
Yeah, we did. We got gigs here and there.
Right.
We used it, but it was just like, really? Do we really need a bus that was always breaking down and we didn't know how to drive it?
Right.
It was a double clutch, as I remember. Jimmy Greeley drove it for us.
Now, when you started drumming with the Gizmos, did they contact you or did you contact them?
Bob contacted me.
Because my friend Phil was drumming for about 2 weeks before you got there. Now, they didn't have a drummer. He went down.
Yeah.
And he drummed with them for like 2 weeks. And then I think they realized that maybe he wasn't good fit or whatever. Yeah, and I always wondered if they had called you because they knew of a drummer down in Indianapolis or if you had seen the same ad that Phil did. Because
No.
Phil saw an ad
I
in
didn't
the
see
paper.
the ad.
Yeah, and he wrote him a letter saying, I like the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, and Uriah Heep. And he put Uriah Heep in there just as a sort of like a curveball. And I guess Bob thought that was funny. So, he brought him down. I went down there with him, Phil drummed. And at the time I didn't know, but it seemed okay to me. I didn't know. And then like a week later, I go back and we do it again. Then a week later, Phil comes to school and he goes, yeah, I'm not the drummer anymore. And I'm like, what happened? He says, they got a new guy and he's better than me, so, And then I said, well, what are you going to do? And he says, well, they offered me the job of tambourine player. And
one of my favorite Gizmos pictures is Phil in like that chef's coat, chef's jacket,
yes.
just kind of, and it's kind of a smoky stage, and he's off to the side, just kind of a profile of him standing there, and I'm like, kind of says it all about what we were doing.
Well, he was responsible for what I think was maybe one of the greatest rock moments ever, and it was at Max's Kansas City when there was nobody there but Dear France and a bartender.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
So, and they had the tables, going out.
Yeah.
Like sun
Like a
rays from
runway.
from the
Like
thing.
they were runways out from the stage.
Yeah. Well, do you remember that Phil? They used to let Phil do "I Go Crazy."
Yeah.
And he grabbed the mic and he walked out onto one of those tables and he goes, "Where is everybody in this fuck ass town?" And just as he said that, the table collapsed like that, and he's like sprawled all over the floor.
I love that tour. Right?
I had a blast because
I had a
it was the
blast.
first time I'd ever, been away. And remember, Bob got really mad at me because I went to CBGB's for the Blitz benefit and didn't tell him. And so, and he was like, you gotta tell me when you're doing this stuff. I'm responsible for you. And I'm like, okay, but I'm just here, And I remember also we stayed at my uncle's house, if you remember, his loft. Like a couple of days before we left, Bob goes, have you called your uncle to tell him we're coming yet? And I said, no, I wanted it to be a surprise. Because at that age, I thought, hey, my nephew's here with a bunch of people. Great.
He'll love this.
And he goes, call him now. So, yeah, you learn. Now, I'm trying to remember, we went to Buffalo first, right?
Yeah.
Buffalo first, and then Boston for 2 nights, right?
Yeah.
And then New York for 2
We
or
went
3
to
nights?
Buffalo. Did we go to Rochester too?
No, there was only 3 stops.
Oh.
Buffalo,
Okay.
Boston, and New York. But I'm pretty positive there were 2 shows in Boston, 2 nights.
Yeah,
And I
there
think there
was.
was at least 2 nights, if not 3, in New York.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had a blast because I'm 17. I don't have to go to school, and I'm hanging out with some cool dudes who like music. So I was fine. I was doing great. Now Tim wasn't with us then, right?
No.
Was it Steve Ficus?
Steve Ficus, yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
And Ted and.
Oh, that's right. Ted was that.
Yeah,
that
he was
year. Ted was always so nice. I mean, he was another person who was always like super nice.
Yeah.
You know. And
To this day.
Oh yeah, I got him on Facebook. He's always nice. He's a gynecologist, right?
He is. I don't know if that's what he's doing. The last time I saw him, you know, he's a doctor,
Right.
and he was the in-house doctor at ArcelorMittal Steel, doing all of their workplace injury stuff. It's a steel mill. There's a line out his door.
Yeah,
These
there's gonna
people
be
are
injuries.
scalding hot steel on my back.
Yes.
Oh, come in. You know, I mean, he had his hands full.
I'm sure.
But that's what he was doing the last time I talked to him. He and I went to a shop in Maryville, Indiana. He bought electric drums. He was trying an electric drum kit. He wanted to know what I thought. Well, I think electric drums suck. So I thought, not going to be good.
Hey, everybody,
Right.
thanks for listening.
Is this a good kit or
See
not?
you next
It's
time.
a terrible kit. And that's a terrible kit.
Right.
They're all terrible.
But hey, if you want to make something that goes, boo,
Yeah.
then they're great.
And-
After the Beatles, so I assume your taste sort of changed a little bit. What did you head towards after that?
You know, I like the Dave Clark Five a lot.
Sure.
I tended toward. I kind of liked the dirtier sound, kind of in terms of engineering and sound. So
Right.
you know, the raspy sax in the Dave Clark Five was
Right.
interesting.
Well, their records were produced in a way that they sounded really awesome coming out of a car speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the speakers back then too, they were all you listened on a small radio
Yeah.
speakers. You didn't have quality audio equipment, so it was all, and it was, you know, mono for the most part.
But there are certain things that I can remember as a child, like say Paint It Black or You Really Got Me, that when they came out of that speaker,
Yeah.
it was just like, whoa,
Yeah.
you know? And I know that they had to put a lot of time into mixing things to sound good on a radio. I think I read a couple articles where a lot of the producers would actually bring a little car speaker
They
into the
did.
studio with them.
They'd have the
and
big
mix it with that.
studios, the Altex up here, and then they had a toggle switch to these little itty bitty speakers down on the. Right, they'd set these little speakers on the console, so they would essentially be like, I'm driving in my car.
Yeah.
And how's it sound? Because I think you had to do that.
Yeah.
Nobody had the studio equipment.
Yeah. Well, it's because of that I kind of became the music guy that I became. Like the Beatles on Ed Sullivan is my first memory. I mean, it's like as far back as my brain goes. And I just remember sitting there in my Huckleberry Hound pajamas. I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
But it's the best thing I've ever seen, you know? And then my mom, like I said, my parents were young. So my mom had like, you know, she wasn't super hip, but she had like a lot of Herman's Hermits and you know, Spanky and Our Gang, stuff like that.
You know, I think the next evolution after all of that stuff was hearing Jefferson Airplane, Somebody to Love on the radio, because it's a cold beginning. You know, there's no. She starts singing from the first beat.
Right.
And you didn't hear a lot of that. There was always some sort of introduction. This is the key.
Okay.
Some sort of intro, and then, you know, the song would start.
Well, you know, the thing about the Beatles was they're the only band I can think of that consistently started their songs with a chorus.
Yeah, right. She loves you.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I was at one point I kind of realized, I was like, when the Beatles were so confident in their stuff, they were like going, look, we're going to give you the chorus first. And the rest of the song is still so good that you're going to like it.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And nobody does that anymore.
That's
Nobody.
That's the Mickey Thompson theory of hooks. Mickey Thompson, I did off-road shows with him. arena shows with him, and his philosophy was, his motto was, we will sell you the whole seat, but you'll only need the edge.
Right, I remember that.
And he would do, the first race would be arguably the most thrilling race, the first thing. And he would offer anybody a refund on their ticket, after the first 15 minutes. If you didn't like the show, you can go to the box office and get a refund.
Right.
But he'd start the show with a bang.
Yeah.
And then you'd go, well, I'm going to stay. Anybody this ballsy, there must be some meat here. And I always liked bands who'd approach it. I thought the Kinks did a nice job early on.
Yeah.
With that.
I was kind of wondering that because I know after the first couple of singles they kind of disappeared from the scene because of their various problems with the musicians union. Now the Who, of course, I assume was that. Did you see them at whatever Lake Michigan, Schaefer's Park?
Lake Schaefer?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Because that and the Yardbirds are two shows that people still talk about.
Yeah.
And there was a guy there who took great pictures. My uncle
low ceiling.
Yes.
It was.
My uncle said it was awesome. He said that Keith Moon poured milk in his drum, so every time he hit him, all this milk would come flying up on him. And he said that at one point at the end, Pete Townsend, instead of breaking his guitar, he looked up and I guess there was a big long line of fluorescent lights. And my uncle said he took the headstock of the guitar and he put it up there and then just ran along it, breaking all the glass as he did. And there's pictures of it. Years later, I saw pictures of it. I was like, oh man,
I love that stuff.
that would have been that would have been the time to see them really. That really would have.
Yeah. Early, all those bands early on.
Yeah. Well, I was reading something recently, and they asked somebody, and I forget who it was, but it was someone who was there, and they asked him who was the best live band of the British invasion, and he was like, The Who.
Yeah.
That's it, just The Who.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I've seen some footage of the Kinks from France, where they are rocking out pretty well too, and I always heard good things about the Move when they played live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever saw the Move.
They never came over. They came over here for like a week once, and then they couldn't break here or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but they were very popular over there.
I like the Move.
Oh, I mean, I did. I got kind of, because of your imports, I got kind of into them.
Imports.
Well, the thing was. Like, say, for instance, the Stooges, like the first two Stooges albums, they were out of print forever. I wanted them, but I couldn't find them anywhere.
Yeah.
I finally got them in New York. The first time I went to New York, I found import copies at a place, and I got Raw Power. I'm like, okay, great, finally. And my uncle goes, no, you want Funhouse. And I was like, but I keep hearing about this one. He goes, no, you want Funhouse. And I was like, but everyone keeps telling me I want this one. He goes, no, you want Funhouse. And he was right. I mean, Funhouse I can still listen to any time of the day or night. It's the only album, other than the first Gene Vincent album, where I've had the police called on me for playing it too loud.
Too loud?
Yes.
Man.
Yeah, twice.
Nice.
So I assume if you went towards the dirty stuff, I assume you were probably into a lot of the garagey type stuff that was coming out?
Definitely.
Like the Seeds and the Shadows of Night. And
Well, Shadows of Night went to... Two members of the Shadows of Night went to my high school.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The rest of them went to Arlington High School. I went to Wheeling. So Tom Schiffauer, the drummer, and I can't remember the bass player's name, went to my high school.
Did you ever see them?
All the time. They played the high school like...
Weren't they based out of Chicago?
Well, they considered Arlington, Heights, and Mount Prospect, Chicago.
Okay.
No, these were all suburban kids.
Okay. Well, yeah, they were the ones that could afford the instruments.
Yeah. And we all had to, WLS was the AM station, and they would have most requested, so we all had to call to request Gloria, Shadows of Night, which, beat the shit out of Van Morrison, the them version in Chicago. I don't know how it did nationally. We didn't care.
Right.
We were all about the Shadows.
Well, regional hits were much more common back then than they are now. I mean, like a band like Love, for instance. You know, if you lived in these three states, they were the biggest thing in town. The minute you got one state over, they're going, who?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
That's all because Arthur Lee didn't want to tour. He basically said, well, we're making money here every week, playing here. We'll just stay here. And from what I understand, they played very, very few shows out of California. I think they played the Grandy Ballroom once, at a couple other places. But he just didn't want to tour. I met him once when I was
Yeah.
when I was covering Legendary Stardust Cowboy when he did the Meltdown Festival over in London. I got flown out there the day before, just on a lark. It just sort of happened. And this was right after David Bowie covered I Took a Trip on a Gemini Spaceship. And so a lot of stuff was kind of happening, and my uncle said, you should probably go and get some footage. And I was like, well, I really can't afford to go to London. So he bought me a ticket and paid for it and everything. It was awesome. Okay, I go to the hotel where the Legendary Stardust Cowboy is staying, and Klaus Floride and Joey Myers sitting at a table. And I go sit down with them, and we're talking and stuff, and I look over and I said, I think that's Arthur Lee over there sitting on the couch. And they're looking and said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I think so. I think they actually were playing here a couple nights ago. Maybe, it seems too much of a coincidence. So we all three walked over there and were like, hey, are you Arthur Lee? Yeah. And he was really nice to us for about a minute or two.
Yeah.
And then he had a girl with him, and he leans over to me and he goes, hey man, you guys got to go. You're cramping my style. And we're like, okay, thanks for the music. Cool.
Yeah.
And then we went upstairs to tell the Leds that I was there because he didn't know I was going to be there. We knock on the door. He opens it like 3 inches, and he goes, Holy Philpott! See you tomorrow.
You're like, welcome to London.
Yeah, I was like, thanks. But it was great though. He played a show with Daniel Johnson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and Daniel Johnson's dad was with him at the time. This was right before the documentary came out. Have you seen the documentary?
I haven't.
It's really good. It's pretty touching. But at one point, his dad was telling us a story about, which is in the movie. He said that Daniel Johnson was in a plane. They were flying to a gig, and he was reading these Casper comics, and he kind of started going crazy about, I don't get this. A ghost? What? I don't get this. What's going on? And he kind of had a fit. And he reached over and he turned off the engine of the airplane, and then he threw the keys out the window. Yeah, this is true. And his dad had to land the plane, crash landing style, on top of a bunch of trees to slow them down before they got to the field.
Holy shit.
Yes. And we're going like, I'm sorry, say that again. Yeah. And the whole time, Daniel Johnson, he's like standing in a corner, like hunched over, like looking at us. Like, I mean, he said maybe 2 words to us the whole time. He was a shut down human being.
Yeah.
I know he's had a bad history and stuff, so I felt bad for him. But then we played with him again, like 2 years later at that Meltdown, at the Highline Festival that David Bowie put on in New York, and it was exactly the same. He just sort of sat there and stared at the floor, and but he went over well. He walked out on stage. There was an immense amount of love, coming from that crowd. And for the Leds too, but for probably different reasons. Have you ever seen the Legendary Stardust Cowboy
Not live?
He puts on a show. Now I want to ask you about this one night that's kind of famous. Do you remember the night where the Ramones were playing the Vogue, Patti Smith and Bebop Deluxe were playing at the Circle Theater, and then somehow or another, like a week before this was supposed to happen, Bob got you guys a gig at some little tavern in Bloomington that you guys had to play. You guys played that same night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So do you remember? Like, did you hop in your car and try to come back real quick to catch any of the other shows, or
I
do you
don't
remember?
think so. I thought I was at the Ramones at the Vogue.
Well, they came twice before I ever saw them. There was.
So maybe it was the other time.
Well, there was the first time, and everyone was going on about it, and then I believe the one with Bebop Deluxe stuff was the second time. I'm not sure, but I just remember that I couldn't go to any of them. I was grounded. So I couldn't go help out the Gizmos in Bloomington. I couldn't go see the Ramones because I was underage anyway.
Yeah.
And I couldn't go see Patti Smith and Bebop Deluxe. So I was like,
I didn't see Patti Smith and Bebop. I would have remembered.
I would have liked to, I mean, I'm sure that would have been prime time to see both of them, actually.
No, yeah.
So that's like a classic night. You talk to people, they tell you which show they picked, or if you're Mike Sheets, he'll tell you he went from one, ran over to the other, and then came back. So.
Yeah, no, I was in Bloomington.
Okay.
I'm confident of that.
Right. Well, I can't imagine you telling Bob, hey, I'm
No,
not
I
playing
can't
that
play
show.
the-
I got tickets for something.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No.
Now, when the Gizmos kind of came to an end, was it right around the time that the record company, you sold the record company? Did
Yeah.
all this stuff kind of happen all at once, and then you moved away, right?
Yeah. Well, the Gizmos moved to Jersey.
Right.
I stayed in Indy.
Right. And I don't blame you.
And, they went through their cycle.
Right.
out there. And then Dale moved back and stayed with me for, I don't know, maybe a year. Lived at the house for a year, trying to figure out.
Right.
And that's when we went through this series of band names and so the Santa Fe's.
Right to left.
Yeah. There was the Satellites, I can't remember if it was Santa Fe's, Satellites, right to left, or Satellites, Santa Fe's, right to left.
Right.
Which became the Vulgar Bowman. But that was all in that 80s period.
Well, now, when did you move away? What year was that?
We moved out here in 93.
Okay, that was the year I was in Germany.
We moved out here. We had an apartment out here. We were kind of going back and forth. And we bought this place in 95.
Now, did you have a job waiting for you here? Or
Yeah. It was a job I had in Indianapolis. And that was kind of the thing that I was becoming less and less reliable as a band member. I went from, being involved in a lot of things, I don't know why or
Right.
how I could juggle all these things, to not really juggling. I was having trouble juggling two things.
Right.
And the job was becoming increasingly intense. So I kind of went, and I always had this thing like living in a van down by the river nightmare, that I'm not sure that's where I wanted to end up being.
Whenever I see a refrigerator box, I always wonder if there's enough room in it for my books.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of expecting it to get worse as I go down the road.
So I think, and I'm not really sure where in the timeline, but it was probably, in the late 80s, mid 80s,
Right.
where I just thought, I might want to just make a career out of, I had this kind of vision where, wait a minute, I've been doing these two things basically.
Right.
I had a job that made money, and it was in events, doing Ringling and Disney and all those kinds of things.
Right.
And it was a good job. And then I was playing in bands and having a great time.
Right.
But not, I couldn't make a living.
No.
It wasn't really doing that. I was playing with Randy, kind of unreliably. I was playing with Dale, kind of unreliably. I was in the Rockaholics, which was actually at the time, all the bands I was in, the most reliable paycheck from a band standpoint,
Right.
the Rockaholics.
Really?
Oh yeah, the Rockaholics did all right. People liked that, especially at that time, liked the rockabilly music.
Now, I think I skipped over something, and this may not be a thing, but did you have anything to do with Crazy Alice?
Yeah, yes I did, because
Okay.
we thought we could do anything.
Okay, so I guess we go back. You were actually jogging more than I initially thought.
Yeah. That was. I loved booking the bands.
Right.
Loved it. So it was Steve Cohen and me and I can't remember his name. My dad knew his dad, but anyway, he was. It was a third.
Mm-hmm. Now, was it initially in a different location than the location that everybody knows now?
Yeah. Crazy Al's was across the street, 54th and College, but across the street where I think it's a flower shop or something like that.
Right.
And it was a pizza parlor, and they had bands that would, as you came in the door,
Right.
to the right was this little area where bands played, but it was small. And Jeff Bugby moved it to the location everybody knows.
Right.
And was running it, and then we convinced Jeff that he should sell it to us.
Yeah, what's one more thing on my plate? That's okay, fine.
We had nothing about, cost of food or, just
Right.
anything like that.
Well, I didn't go there as often as everyone else did because the first year or two I was underage. So,
Oh, that didn't matter.
but the funny thing is there was a show once, and I think it was probably DNA or the Cramps or something, that me and Dave Fulton were standing out in the sidewalk,
Yeah.
and we're just talking, blah, 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 blah. And this guy pulls up in a car, rolls down his window, and looks at Dave, and he goes, "Fuck you, you asshole!" Like that, and Dave goes, "Huh?" And the guy looks closer, and he goes, "Oh, my faux pas."
takes off.
Yeah, that is our shared Crazy Al's memory.
That's a nice
We
memory.
both looked at each other like, what? And he was gone. It's like, he was nice enough to apologize.
It
So,
was good of him.
yes, it was.
I was talking a friend of mine who just had work on his hip. I got a text from him. You know, he's recuperating, they're releasing
Right.
him. And he said that Dr. Yun brought the bones they took out of my hip, brought them in. And I said,
They don't usually
I have
do
a
that."
bones story. The drummer for the Cramps, we booked the Cramps. They were there 2 nights or something like that. And the drummer had a necklace made out of bones that he wore. And I said, and I was asking you about it because I jokingly said, well, I'm having my wisdom teeth pulled. Maybe, be sure to bleach them. That was his advice. Be sure to bleach those bones. Teeth. All right. So I told him, well, bring them home. Bring your bag of bones home, and we will bleach them and make a necklace out of them, and you could wear them when we play.
Did he?
I think he's home today, so I don't know
Okay.
what he's going to do. But I think he'll bring the bones home.
Oh.
He goes, there's a lot of them. Holy shit, what'd they take out
Yeah.
of you?
Well, my old partner at the record store, he had an appendectomy. Appendectomy? No, what's that thing that people have that they don't need anymore? Appendix.
So
Yeah.
it's an
Okay.
appendectomy.
Yeah, he had an appendectomy. He told the doctor, he says, I want that appendix. Can you put it in a jar for me? Doctor said, no,
Yeah.
we don't do that. And he was like, but it's mine. He's like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
you
exactly.
can't have it. So, and he was really mad. He was just like, God damn it, I told him I want my appendix back. They won't give it to me.
They go to med school.
Is that what happens?
They put them in alcohol and ship them off to med school.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what people learn about shit like that.
Right.
With your appendix.
Okay, so at the end of the Crazy Al's thing, I mean, did you just get to a point where you're like, I can't do this anymore, I'm out? Or did everybody say that? Or did it just come to a logical end?
Yeah, no, I left, under a not so good, kind of under a cloud.
Sure. Hey, but you were young. You can keep saying that.
And, it's something I regret.
But do you think it would have went on longer if it had
If
been
I would have stayed
differently?
involved?
Yeah.
No. No, I didn't have the pixie dust or anything
All right.
like that.
But it wasn't very long. It was only like 3 or 4 years, right? If that?
Steve would know better. But yeah, 3 years or so sounds about right.
Yeah, because I know towards the end, they weren't having as many bands, but they had bought a subscription to whatever it was, where they would send you a VHS tape with a bunch of videos on it. And this was before MTV, and it was something. It was like Something America. It was like American.
Oh, that's a
something.
good idea.
And they used to just play those, and people would come and just watch punk TV and drink beer.
Yeah.
There toward the end.
Yeah. I remember we did, I think The Future played. We had Camp Out with the Future, where...
I remember that.
Where, we locked the doors at 2 because you couldn't stay open after 2.
Right.
So we locked the doors. People had to bring your sleeping bags and,
I remember that.
we'd do silly stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, did you ever hear
And
about?
I liked booking the bands. It was really interesting, the bands that we got offered and the amount of money that we, essentially didn't have to pay them.
Right.
Go-Go's, Joan Jett, the Cramps and X and
Right.
so on. And I think it was because we were between, Chicago and Cincinnati.
Right.
Cleveland and Chicago, well, we'll dip down and play Indianapolis
Get
in
an
the middle of
extra
the
show.
week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and pick up, traveling money. And,
Sure.
And so it was a kind of a neat thing, the kind of acts we got offered.
Right. Because you're right. Because where we're located, people go, we got an extra day. If we can get a show there, it's
Yeah.
right there. We don't have to travel far, and it's extra money.
Yeah,
So
extra money.
We'll
We'll sell some T-shirts.
Yeah.
And,
The touring industry, I don't know if you know this or not, but way back when, like say if Fleetwood Mac were going to go out on tour, they would play like small markets for like the first week or two, like Indianapolis
Yeah.
and Cincinnati and stuff. Because they knew that's where their roughest shows were going to be before they got kind of oiled and ready to play right.
Yeah,
so
they didn't want to go out to Madison Square Garden and suck.
Yeah, so they went to smaller places where the media didn't matter or wasn't even there, so they could get good. Now, speaking of Ed Ott, who just passed recently, were you at the show where we played between his two sets, the Cheeses from France? It was at Skits before it was Caesar's Pub and whatever. He asked the Cheeses from France to play there, and we were like, okay, that's great. Cause
I have seen the Cheeses from France. I don't remember.
Okay.
Cheeses from France, as you know, was one of my favorite bands.
I hope so. You know how we got our name, right? We were trying to come up with a name, and I was working at the Glass Chimney, and we got this huge box, this promotional box, pushing cheese. And it had like a bag of buttons that said "Say Fromage" and like a bunch of posters and flags and stuff, and they all said Cheeses from France. And we were like, dude, if we call ourselves Cheeses from France, we got all this promotional material already made for us. And so that's how we got the name of it.
But my favorite part of the Cheeses from France, besides the music, was the band members' names, which you guys don't remember what you called yourselves.
I don't.
And the only one I remember now, but I thought all of the names were hysterical because they were all cheese names. Yes. Was Roger Camembert.
Yes.
I thought the Cheeses from France. There's a guy in the band named Roger Camembert. I thought it made all the sense in the world, and I thought it was a lovely concept. And
well, right before he went to college, we had a show, and Ed Ott offered us to play with him. Now we thought it was an opening, which is fine. We'd go on there and play, and then whatever. But Ed decided he wanted us to play between his two sets. Now this place is packed, tons of people in there. Come to see Ed Ott in the future. So he plays his first set. Everyone's happy. Woohoo! Yeah, boo-boo. We got up there, and by the time it was done, we cleared that place. There was nobody left.
Nobody was left for Ed's second set.
They were gone, and Ed got kind of mad, and we were like, we didn't really mean to do that, but you knew what you were getting into. Why did you put
asked us to play.
Yeah, there's a videotape of that show that Mr. Science did while he was on mushrooms. So he keeps flipping like to negative to positive, and turning the camera sideways and like going through where the band's playing. It's easily the noisiest show we ever played. There was like 10 people on stage. 2 of them were playing Battleship. and we cleared the place. Well, the owners came up to us and they were shitty. I mean, they were just like, get the fuck out of here. You are banned from here. Do not ever come here again. And we're like, okay. But the thing was, our regular bands had already been booked to play there the next week, and it was all the same people, just separated into 2 bands.
Yeah.
And
different names.
Yeah. So when we showed up at the door, the guy goes, and we're like, yeah, but you already booked this before. There's nobody there, so I saw the Bad Brains
at Skits.
Yeah. And they
that would have been a good show.
They brought HR up in a chair that they duct taped him to. He was in a chair completely from the neck all the way down, both feet to the chairs.
And a microphone.
Yes. One song is all it took for him to get out of that. Jumping and ripping the tape and breaking the chair legs and stuff. And we're just going, holy shit. They played like 3 fast songs, then they started playing reggae, and I think I left. Because you hadn't given me that tape yet, and I was just like, I am not listening to this stuff. It all sounds the same. I'm out of here. So, but you and Dale as well were very largely responsible for the things that I ended up listening to later. You remember Mark Kimmerly?
Yeah.
Okay. One day I was at the second time around, and we had that VCR there. That one was like 300 pounds, wood paneled, and he goes, "Hey, you want to see something?" I was like, "Okay, sure." So he puts in the Tammy Show and fast forwards it to James Brown.
Yeah.
And the only James Brown I knew was what little bit I had heard on the radio here and there. I knew he was a guy who was supposed to be energetic or whatever, but I'd never listened to him.
Oh.
And he plays this for me, and by the time it's over, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
They let him do that back then? And he played it for me again, and it was, and that day right there, I can pinpoint that day to the day where I kind of branched out.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, there's a lot of stuff I don't know about, I guess, I still wasn't listening to country. Country came much later. I had a girlfriend down in Bloomington, and I was going down to visit her, and I was going through some cassettes to take with me to listen to on the way, and there was that Hank Williams, that 24 greatest hits.
Oh, yeah.
White cover with the bust on it.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, you know, maybe I should listen to this. I heard a lot of people like Hank Williams. Okay, fuck it, it's country, but I'll listen to it anyway. So I get in the car and I pop it in. The first song comes on, and I'm like, oh, I know that song. And the next song comes on, I'm like, well, I know that song too. And by the time it was over, I'm like going, okay, look, I've never listened to a country station in my life, and yet I knew 2/3 of these songs.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
And, you know, I came to realize that there's so much music in the air, grocery store, passing car, you know, wherever, that you eventually are going to hear something at least once if you're just living.
Right.
You're just walking around. And I saw a documentary on Rodgers and Hart, Rodgers and Hammerstein a couple of years later. And the same thing. They were like, well, you know, and then they wrote this song, blah, blah. I'm like, they wrote that? I know that song. And then they wrote this song, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, holy shit. And, you know, I just, I kind of got into like a song thing for a while. I kind of got into Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole and stuff. And, you know, I'm all over the place. It's just, you know, I concentrate on something for a year or two, and then I move on to something else, you know.
There's some great Nat King Cole stuff.
Oh, I know. The stuff with the trio is my favorite.
Yeah.
And Dale kind of poo-poos some of the later stuff, but I like that stuff too. You know.
Yeah, you know, I'm a fan of the early stuff when he was, you know, more known for being a pianist.
Right.
And kind of singing on the side, and it's cool to kind of see the evolution and how Capitol Records kind of went with him on that.
Yeah, I got really big into Louis Jordan for a while too.
Yeah.
I mean the Louis Jordan stuff. I mean I liked it immediately. Like the first note, I was like, yeah, okay, I like this.
Yeah.
You know. And there's a Louis Jordan album called Rock and Roll with Louis Jordan that I think Mickey Baker plays guitar on. You know, it's kind of like those Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf chess rock records.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like he didn't like it. But everyone else does.
Yeah.
You know, because I know I remember people bitching about that Muddy Waters record, and I listened to it, and I'm like, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
You know, but the Louis Jordan, the Rock and Roll with Louis Jordan record, if you ever heard it, there's some smoking guitar on it. I mean, basically the songs sound exactly the same. They just added guitar.
Yeah.
And then drums on some of them.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, I'm unfamiliar.
Oh yeah, it's
I
out
need to
there.
listen.
I'll bet it's on Amazon.
Yeah, I bet it's on Amazon.
Covered,
You know the
covered
rest.
the gamut. Yeah.
You know the rest.
Yeah, but again, I just want to stress how thankful I am that you guys were nice to me. Because you probably didn't know it, but that was kind of a weird period of my life. There were things going on that was
You know,
not
I
great.
think, you know, we all had weird shit going on.
Right.
You know, like Ted. Ted was trying to be a serious med student.
I know, singing about muff diving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
And you know what to do about this and that. You know, we all had
Right.
stuff like that going on.
Did you ever, what I'm about to tell you, I'm going to cut out, but did you ever hear about the Valentine card that Bob Richard sent me in the mail?
No.
Okay, so I'm living with my dad, who's not a humorous fellow. I love him, but he's just not.
Yeah, he's
just
not a jokey kind
not
of
a joker
kind of guy.
So yeah, so he comes in the house. He goes, "Here, you got this," and he hands me this Hallmark envelope, and I recognize the handwriting on it as Bob's, and I was like, "Huh, I wonder what he's sending me." So I open it up, and it's this flowery card. It's got like flowers and shit on it. It says, "I love you" or whatever. I open it up. Oh, this gets worse.
Oh.
I open it up, and there was a full condom taped to the inside of this card.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, if this thing would have like popped in
Oh,
the
yeah.
mail, my dad would have been like, "You have mail."
Oh,
Like that.
man.
Yeah. So I mean, I had to find. I mean, I was flattered. I told Bob, I said, "That's great. I'm really flattered, but I'm just that's just not what's going to happen."
Yeah.
And then he started focusing on Phil, and Phil finally said, "Well, hey, it's not going to happen either." And that's when he started hanging out with John Barge. Remember John Barge?
Yeah.
Remember his parents caught them 69ing on the couch when they
Oh,
came home?
jeez.
And he was underage.
Yeah, I mean, when I knew John, he was,
A little wild.
16.
Yeah. So, because that's the only reason they kept Phil in the band, right? Me. You didn't know that?
No,
Bob had
I was just a drummer.
Bob had a huge crush on me. I mean, huge.
But it sounds like it.
And I mean, there were times I used to help him with record conventions, because A, he would pay me, and B, they were record conventions.
Right.
So I'd be able to get Clash bootlegs and stuff. So
Yeah.
I had to spend the night at his house once, and the next morning, we load up the car, we're driving to Detroit, and he goes, "I'm sorry." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Well, I'm sorry." I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, "Well, when I saw you get in bed last night, I got kind of hot, so I masturbated. I hope you didn't hear it." And I'm like, I mean, at this point, I didn't like, dislike gays or anything, but this was still the '70s, and I still had a little bit of that seed of the way people thought in the '60s, in my head, And I was just like, man, I never talk about stuff like that. Why would you bring it up? I said, I didn't hear anything, and I said, we can just pretend that you never just said that.
Can we just pretend this never happened?
To his credit, he never tried to force himself on me or anything.
Yeah.
He was always very cool.
Yeah.
I have no problems with him. I don't hate him to this day or whatever. We're fine. I haven't seen him in a long time, of course, but yeah, it was just sort of just another funny little adventure that has weird stories connected to it. But anyway, that's why.
See, I live in a bubble.
Yeah, when you came in, they were going to kick Phil out entirely, and Bob said, "No, I think it'd be funny to have a fat guy with a tambourine," and nobody liked that idea except for Bob, and Bob was in charge, so poof.
Yeah.
And he only did it because I would come down to practice with Phil. So, yeah.
Well, I thought Phil did a fantastic job.
Sure, with what he had to work for, he did great.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And he maybe didn't need to take off his shirt with those suspenders and the batting cap, but still, cool. We still see Phil all the time. I'd say.
I like him on Facebook.
Before
I like the
fa-
stuff he does.
Yeah, before the pandemic, we've been seeing about every 2 weeks or so. He comes down to visit his kids. So
apparently, he's still in contact with Bob, and Bob is putting out a Gizmos compilation of covers.
Oh, really?
Of different bands covering Gizmo songs.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know.
Phil and
that.
I did one of them way like 10 years ago when we were still recording.
Is he going to use it?
I guess so. Phil said he's submitting it, so.
Huh. If I saw Bob, I'm not sure I would recognize him anymore. But last time I saw him like 84, maybe 83, 84.
That's probably the last time I saw him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it was no hard feelings. If he ever listens to this, I don't want him to think that well, I'm going to cut most of that out anyway. So. Because I don't really like to rub it in Phil's face either. That the only reason you were in the Gizmos is because
Bob was trying to get to me.
Yeah. So, but Phil knew anyway, and he finally eventually got kind of tired of, being the foible.
Yeah. Well, I remember when Ted was leaving and Steve Ficus was leaving, and I was kind of like, well, I wonder what's going to happen.
Right. And that's when Tim showed up, right?
Yeah. Dale and I and a woman bass player played as the Carbites.
Right. I remember that because people would ask Dale, "What's a carbide?" And he'd say, "Other cars." Yeah.
Other cars. Yeah. We played as the Carbites, and we played in Bloomington, probably at the library.
Mm-hmm.
And the opening act was Tim's band, and I thought they were good.
Yeah.
And then, Tim was in the band. They kind of like, well, why don't, unbeknownst to me, let's reconfigure and add Tim. And
I think he was a good fit.
I think he was a great fit.
Yeah, all the songs from that period, like Biscuits and Gravy and stuff.
Yeah.
I just think that stuff is some of the best stuff
Yeah.
Dale's ever done.
Yeah. And he had such a great attitude. He was up for anything musically. He didn't go, hey, I write songs. I got a bunch of songs I want to do. He just went with the band.
Right. When I did a podcast with him, I kind of got a lot of the straight and skinny about the end of it, and he said that although the Gizmos ending, he said, was not fraught with violence or bad feelings or anything, but he said he definitely felt that he had reached a point where his songs should be out there.
Well, I could understand that.
Yeah.
At the time, at least while I was in the Gizmos, the amount of songs that Dale and Billy were bringing to the front, it was just like this floodgate
Oh, I know.
of songs that we were learning and reading, and a mix of covers, and they were all good. They were all like, if we give these songs some time, if we work with these songs, they'll go from good to great. If they don't get elevated, they'll go over here.
Right.
But the amount of material, every time we practiced, I was just like flabbergasted. I wrote a song, I wrote a new song, and da-da-da-da-da. So if you're another songwriter,
Yeah.
how do you get in? And Billy and Dale were tight. They were writing stuff together and apart and together, doing stuff all the time, and I could see where down the road, if you're a songwriter, and do I get the George Harrison? Do I get 1 or 2 songs on the album?
And Tim has written a lot of songs. I mean,
He's written a lot
of songs.
Yeah.
He puts out an album like every 3 months sometimes.
He's always writing.
Yeah.
And that, I don't think, well, when I was in the Gizmos, that really wasn't, we didn't really think of Tim as a songwriter any more than we thought of me as a songwriter. This wasn't what we did in the band.
Well, what's funny is I know probably by heart about 30 Gizmo songs, about 30 or so. And every time Bob put out a CD, I would realize that there were 2 or 3 songs I'd completely forgotten about. I'd put on the CD and I'd hear, something then we did twice. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that song. And it honestly, the sheer volume of songs that was written in that period by Dale and Billy, and I assume Robert from down in Florida.
Oh, Robert Ray?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the tail end, I don't think Robert had that much. Robert was more when we were the Satellites and...
Okay. Because I know him and Dale were writing a ton of songs back and forth with
They were writing a ton of songs.
Yeah.
A ton of songs. And that was, right to left especially, there was a lot of Robert Ray. And I never melded well with...
I never met him, but...
Robert wrote for Radio Free Rock. That's how I knew him.
But together they wrote some really nice stuff.
They wrote great stuff.
Yeah.
And the benefit I had was I was never, except for one recording session, I was never with Robert. It was always, the songs came to me from Dale.
Right.
And Dale would explain what he wanted and the sound and this and that. So we would take and at the time it was Matt and...
Eric?
Yeah.
Have you seen his Facebook page lately?
No, I got rid of him.
Don't do it.
Yeah, I got rid of him.
It got worse. Yeah, it got much worse.
Then I bailed. I bailed at the right time.
Yes, you did. He had. If murder was legal for one day, I would have to hide. Okay, he detests me.
Yeah.
We got in a thing because I kept hearing about all his troubles, and I'd send him a message and say, hey Eric, I haven't talked in a while. How are you? I heard there's some stuff going on. If you ever need to talk, blah, blah, blah. I'd get messages back like, leave me alone, you fucking psycho. And I'm like, okay, but I wasn't really insulting you. I was just saying hi and seeing if you wanted some help or something. Fuck you! And I'm like, oh, okay. And then, like a year or two later, I had found some old MathBats pictures that I didn't think he'd seen. And I posted them on his Facebook page. I said, hey, Eric, I thought you might want to see these. And then he said something about, I'm feeling kind of down, blah, 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 my ex-wife, blah, 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 blah. And I said, and he said, I'll talk to you about it later on tonight. And I'm like, well, that's nice. Maybe Eric's finally coming around, So
as soon as I sharpen my axe, I'll be right over.
And I told him, I said, dude, I said, don't beat yourself up over love. I said, everybody does stupid shit for love. Don't worry about it. It'll pass. I go to work, I come back, and I can't find his page anywhere. And I'm like going, what's going on here? He blocked me because he said that I was trying to tell him who to have on his friends list and who not to. And he goes, how dare that motherfucker? He was always an asshole. Because I have a fake Facebook page specifically so I can go check out places where I've been blocked to make sure they're not planning to kill me. No, with Eric, I'm half serious. And yeah, so what happened was is I forgot that in the previous.
I'm glad all I do is like.
Yeah, it's the best thing. But he has like 4,000 friends. Okay, 4,000, but they're all. You know, sometimes you get friend requests from a female who has like one picture and no other people on there.
Yeah.
Well, he falls for every one of them because he thinks that somehow he's going to get a date on these. So he has like literally thousands of these fake female Facebook friends. And I told him, and I said, in that same email, I said, hey, Eric, I hope you don't mind, but I noticed that you have, a lot of friends that might be bots. These people, they try to mine your page for personal information, for passwords and stuff. I said, you might want to look into that because that could mess you up. And that's what he got mad about. He goes, I was putting my fingers in his life, trying to tell him who to like, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. So, and then we had a short email exchange that was quite bitter, quite satisfying on my part. And that's the last I would have heard from him, because I told him I was never going to contact him again, don't worry.
Yeah.
I know. It's for the best. It's funny.
And that's not why I go on Facebook to check in on my friends.
Exactly.
I don't care to politic with anybody or anything like that.
Yeah, I did. At first I did.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of empowering. I can tell this motherfucker anything I want, blah, 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 blah. And after a couple of years, I was like, I'm not changing anybody's mind.
No.
They're not changing my mind. And it's just made some of my friends hate me now. So, so that's when I started just posting pictures of bands I like.
Yeah.
And
I like that stuff.
Yeah, I find an interesting picture. I put it in my eBay or my Facebook file. I got like 3,000 or 4,000 to choose from.
Yeah.
I get like 10 or 12 a day. Pop them up there, and it's fine. You're right. Just the main thing about Facebook is I just use it to keep track of the folks I care about.
Which is what it started out to be.
Yeah.
And I think there's nothing evil and malicious about the original intent, but you're out there.
What kind of pisses me off though is that like every once in a while they'll find a post of mine from like 8 years ago that this goes against company standards. We're going to block you for a day. And I'm like, that was 8 years ago. I don't put stuff up like that anymore. Why are you getting mad at me now?
Yeah.
So apparently that happens to a lot of people. So I think they have algorithms that look for certain words. I posted a picture of this Nazi and Jesus walking hand in hand down a road, and I posted that as a underneath it I said, really, you don't have the right to bitch about there being no good brisket in Berlin anymore. And they didn't like it. They didn't think it was funny, I guess. I thought it was kind of humorous, but
apparently, not the what's Glenn Labita. He's in fuckbook jail like daily, daily.
Well,
but he taunts them.
Right. Well, they keep telling me that if the next one happens, we're gonna it's gonna be a 2-day suspension, and then after that you might get suspended for a whole month. And I don't have time to go through 10 years of Facebook posts to see what I maybe should take off before their algorithm finds it. Just see what happens.
A long time ago, I wanted to set up my Facebook account. I wanted it to be Shadow Myers,
right?
Because I just wanted music people, and so I was Shadow Myers for I think a month, and then they took it down because that's not my real name.
Yeah. It used to be you could use any name you wanted, but then somebody figured something else out, and then they did that to everybody.
And then you had to, if you wanted it like a DBA, you had to go through all this rigmarole. So I sent them photos of EP jackets where I'm listed as Shadow Myers.
Right.
And,
sure.
And so now when I go to sign on as Shadow Myers and everything, and this is probably for the last 5 years, he goes, we are still reviewing your your account. We'll let you know. Shouldn't be too much longer.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, so much for that.
So okay, let's wind. Let's get about an hour and a half now. Let's wind it down. But I wanted to ask you specifically about let's say the late 60s, early 70s up to say 1980. What shows did you see from around that time that like stuck with you? I mean, did you see any
All of them.
live shows where just like, oh my God, this is
Massive. I remember the first Led Zeppelin tour at the Kinetic Playground in Chicago, which I was just mesmerized.
Oh sure, I get it.
Right after that first album, and they were playing that first album.
Right.
That was pretty much it. They played 45 minutes.
Well, I imagine watching John Bonham must have been a
From the
mind-blowing
side, because the Kinetic Playground was standing room. It was a big room, and they were first American tour. Nobody really knew who they were.
Yeah,
I don't think the
remember.
place was jam packed, and I was off to the side of the stage, and I just watched his feet. His feet were kind of, I was trying to figure out how he was doing all this shit.
Yeah.
And his feet were pretty incredible.
I couldn't do anything with my feet. As long as I drummed, whatever his hand did, his foot did. And that's it. I could not do any more.
And it was a very simple set.
Right.
A set of Ludwigs. He had 2 floor toms. No gongs, none of that.
Right.
That other shit. 1 ride tom.
No wind chimes.
No wind chimes and nothing. I mean, and that was the whole setup for the whole band. It was, it was these 4 guys, and they just played the shit out of. They were really good at what they did. So I was going to a lot of those shows. Jethro Tull, I think it was the first Jethro Tull tour, and Ian Anderson wore this bathrobe. He would wear a bathrobe. And do the 1 foot,
Sure.
the 1 leg, up, propped up and played, and he the weirdest expressions, really kind of devilish, went around the stage. And again, there was all these English bands, kind of second generation English bands doing
Wishbone Ash and
weird,
Humble Pie and
I ran follow spots at a Wishbone Ash concert. My favorite story about Sunshine, very early on with Sunshine, they would call, because I had a record store,
Right.
I knew Lucas and Sebesma and Joe Halderman, and they would need something, some menial thing. And I'd run follow spots. And Jimmy Greeley and they booked ZZ Top, Edgar Winter, and I don't remember the third act, at Melanie Scatland, and asked us to do the follow spots. Opening act didn't get follow spots. Edgar Winter got follow spots, and Teddy Slattis was the road manager. He managed Johnny Winter and Edgar, and he had this extravagant stage diagram where he goes, this is position 1, this is position 2, this is position 3, this is row A, this is row B. I'm going to call out A5, spot number 2, A5, spot number. I'm going to call these out into your headphones,
Right.
and you have to put. Jimmy and I are like, what? We can't. We're used to just doing this.
Right.
We can't. A5, 2, where are we? So we were pretty much fucking that show up. ZZ Top pulls up for sound check. They pull up. All 3 of them are in a station wagon with a driver. They get out of a station wagon. We do sound check. I'm talking to the road manager, and Jimmy and I are running follow spots. We're ready for the diagram.
Right.
And he goes, you're on Billy. You're on Dusty. See ya.
Yeah. Well, there's only 3 of them too, so it makes it kind of easy.
And it was hilarious, and such a great show.
I was going to say, I'll bet I would have loved to
Oh,
have
my
seen
God.
them that early, because those first 2 or 3 records, talking about record production, the guitar sound on Tres Hombres is out of this world.
And it's Memphis.
Yeah.
I think they're all at Ardent,
Yeah.
as I remember.
I know several of them were. I don't think the first one was, but
Yeah.
I think the next 2 were, I believe.
They were and they were every bit what you bought the record, you got on stage.
Yeah,
and you just looked at them, and it's, as Billy says many, many, many times, same 3 guys playing the same 3 chords.
Yeah, but they're good chords that I like. My ears like them.
They're just dynamite.
Yeah, I saw them twice, but much, much later. But they were still awesome.
Yeah,
They were really awesome.
We did some stuff with Billy at the museum, when I was at the museum, because he's a big car freak.
Did you know he was a member of our video club the second time around?
Oh, yeah?
He came in while they were on tour, and he goes, I gotta watch the same old shit on my bus every single day. He says, you guys got movies here I've been wanting to see for 10 years. And we told him, we're like, well, you know, we kind of prefer local folks to rent them. And he made a deal with us. He took like, I don't know, 20 or 30 videotapes. He wrote us a check for a deposit.
Yeah.
He paid for all the rentals, and he sent them right back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really
He's
cool.
a hell of a guy.
That's what I've heard. I heard an interview with him on a show once, and he seemed like a guy you'd enjoy hanging out with.
He put out a book
Mm-hmm.
about his cars and his guitars. We did a book signing at the museum, and he was just terrific, sitting there, and I'm standing off to the side, and he goes, I gotta go pee, you know, so
Right.
I'll be right back. He goes off, and you know the restroom, you know the museum, the
Yeah.
lobby, the restroom's not that far off. He's gone, and he's gone, and he's gone, and he's gone. So finally I go, he can't take a step without stopping and talking to somebody
He's one of those people.
and talking.
Yeah.
I mean, he will engage, and it took him forever to get to the restroom. He was out of the restroom in no time. Took him forever to get back
Yeah.
because he'd give everybody equal time, whatever they wanted to do. The other thing I remember is we were somewhere eating, and takes his hot sauce out of his jacket, puts the hot sauce on it, and I go, is that Cholula? Is that Tapatio? And he goes, no, this is my hot sauce.
Oh.
I made this hot sauce.
Yeah.
Wherever he went, he took his own hot sauce.
That's awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Now, going back, would you consider John Bonham like the best drummer you've ever seen live? Or is there someone?
No. There was a period of time where I think I picked up a lot of stuff from Richie Hayward of Little Feat. I know it sounds odd, but
I didn't like him at the time, but I really do now.
he was a hell of a drummer.
Oh.
And I'm one of those Little Feat fans. I liked their first two albums, and then, I lost interest.
Well, that live album.
Yeah, the live album really
Yeah.
cuts to his drumming skills too. But the drumming on the very first album, which is a very rugged
Right.
produced album, it's not good. But his fills, kind of his off-kilter stuff, I think that's where I kind of got a sense for if I could just, if my fills could be like a little bit like a roller coaster, just kind of like almost, hey, I hope he gets it back on the beat,
Right.
kind of thing, was from Richie. Keith was fun to watch.
Oh, you did see him?
Yeah,
Okay.
because when I saw him, he never hit the hi-hat.
He didn't have a hi-hat.
Never ever
Yeah.
would strike the hi-hat.
He said it
he
was-
was everywhere else on the kit, and he still had the hi-hat at the time. He was everywhere else on the kit but the hi-hat.
He said you couldn't hear it, so it's not worth hitting.
Yeah.
That's what he said. So.
It's a great point of view. But drummers, rock drummers,
Yeah.
they start with the hi-hat,
I did.
and
sure.
then they go off.
You start by playing shaft. And then you hope you can do something after that.
Yeah.
Well, Keith Moon, of course, was always my favorite drummer as a kid, just because, he was Keith Moon.
Yeah.
Now, to be honest, his timing was not always. But
You talk about off the rails.
right, but for the Who, he was great. It was like I
Perfect.
always thought that if he was in any other band, he wouldn't have been successful. But
Right.
he just happened to have fallen into the perfect place to fall in.
When they started, so this had to be around Who's Next, when they'd go out and they'd have the synthesizer stuff.
Right.
So he would have to track to that.
Yep.
He'd put on those headphones.
Yep.
Just so, now I actually have to keep time with something.
Oh,
I
and
gotta,
you can see the expression on his
Oh.
face, like he's worried.
Man, he is concentrating.
Well, you know what I noticed when I was watching the Tammy show, the James Brown part. Next time you watch it, look at the drummer.
Yeah.
He has a look in his face like he is scared to death to fuck up. Because every time you fuck up, James would dock you like $5 off your pay.
Yeah.
And you can actually see the worry on his face because he drops a stick at one point. And his face goes like, oh, and then he grabs another one.
Yeah.
And
Here's
he's going,
a quarter of my pay.
But James heard it. So, but as far as favorite drummers are concerned, over the last few years, I have actually come to really like Al Jackson Jr.
Oh yeah.
Who is awesome, but who I really like.
Died too young.
Have you ever watched? There's an Ed Sullivan clip on YouTube of the Young Rascals doing "Good Love" on Ed Sullivan. Have you watched that?
Dino Danelli.
Yes.
I watched it when they went on Ed Sullivan.
I've watched it like 50 times. I just watch. Because look, I wasn't that good of a drummer. I was all upper arm. I was no wrist. I was all upper arm. At least. But when I watch him, he's hitting the drums twice as hard as I ever did, and he's doing it with.
It's all in the wrist.
And I'm looking, going.
And he does these flourishes with his sticks.
And he still comes in exactly on time. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just watched it over. I couldn't find any other live footage of them, except recently I found a little black and white thing that wasn't that great, but it was live. They weren't lip syncing. But every time I watch that, I'm just mesmerized just watching it. If I could pick anybody that I could play like, it would be him. And I'm not even that big of a Big Rascals fan. I like them fine, but they were never like my big favorites.
I liked the first album. The good loving.
Yeah. I mean, they kind of.
And then they got schmaltzy.
Yeah, they kind of lost. They lost sight of the goal, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and there were a lot of bands. I would say the Four Seasons, Frankie Valli, and the Four Seasons being one of them, that didn't really need to make psychedelic albums, and yet they still did.
Well, it was kind of like the record labels would go, you gotta.
Yeah. Look, here, we bought you a sitar. We're taking it out of your earnings. Use it.
And it kind of worked with Motown.
Yeah, kind of. Oh, I love that. I love that psychedelic temptation stuff.
Yeah.
I was sitting on a light once. Can't Get Next to You came on my radio. Now, I can't do it now as I've gotten older, but I used to be able to imitate all the Temptations in that song. I can fly, you can rain. So I'm sitting at a stoplight, and it's on. I'm like going, I can fly, the bird in the sky. I can burn. I look over, and there's this black lady in a car laughing at me and pointing. She's like, look at that asshole over there, thinks he's the Temptations.
Tasty white boy
Yeah.
singing Temps.
Yeah, but I love that stuff. When I was a kid, like Ball of Confusion and stuff like that, that stuff was that sounded really good coming out of the car radio. We were going to Grandma's every week, so there'd be at least a good hour to an hour and a half of radio listening.
All of that stuff
Yes.
was great. The drummers I like, Ringo and Charlie.
Sure.
What's not to love?
Yeah. Well, I love Al
Ringo,
Jackson.
left-handed. Here's a guy that's left-handed, but he plays a right-handed kit.
Yeah.
He, finagled a way to do it, but if you listen to those fills from probably Rubber Soul on, his fills all start like he's a left-handed drummer. He switches from the normal left hand being essentially the 2 and the 4 in anything, to flipping it for his fills.
Yeah, his arms look weird when he makes fills, but not so much anymore. But there was a time when people loved to say, "Oh, Ringo was a crappy drummer. He was only popular because he did." And I'm like, listen to Rain and then shut the fuck up.
Yeah. I mean, really.
Yeah.
Listen. He never dropped a beat, ever. Charlie never dropped a beat, ever.
Right. And they play in service of the song. That's the most important part for me. Yeah. That's why I like Al Jackson Jr. Yeah. He's just, the worst thing you can accuse him of is he accidentally hit the microphone with his drumstick during Green Onions. There's a point in there, if you listen for it, you hear him go on his way down. But that's it. I heard that they had a metronome at Stax, and that they had a contest. They were like, okay, we're going to set this metronome, you stay with it. And they got bored. They were like, okay, fuck it. Because he was right on it.
Yeah.
Right on it. And that stuff he did with Al Green, that drumming is it fits so well.
Yeah. Plus, I like the production on the high, the Memphis stuff.
Sure. Have you been to the Stax Museum?
I have.
I cried. I went in there and they showed that 10-minute film beforehand. By the time it was over, I was like, oh God, like that. And then just walking through there, you're seeing all this stuff. Al Jackson's kid, and Isaac Hayes' car and stuff. And then there's that giant wall of 45s. I'm just like, I had so
I bought the
much
T-shirt.
fun there. Oh, I got two magnets and a coffee cup. So
I bought the T-shirt.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. And I was in Memphis a lot on business.
mhm.
I was going there for like 3 years, once a month.
I love Memphis. I mean, it's kind of humid, but other than that, there's something about that city that I just
Yeah.
really like. You know.
And I think the not like the Monks,
Mhm.
some of those bands that were these unknown rock bands
Right.
from Memphis.
I actually talked to one of them on the phone once after that book came out, Black Monk Time. I was thinking, man, somebody should do a documentary about these guys, but somebody already was. So
I have the CD.
yeah, I
bought a bunch of like 45s. Bands. So this was in the 90s. Really good Memphis bands were putting out 45s. 45s.
I love 45s, but I don't have a turntable anymore. So sorry,
I know, and
my street cred is ruined, by the way.
I'm the same. I've got a turntable over here. I don't think I've played a record on it in 20 years.
Yeah. Okay, both our street cred just hit the dirt now.
Yeah. But hey, we're still alive.
Yeah. I'm still listening to music and
And I'm
enjoying it.
still listening to music.
Yeah.
And I'm not like a 70-year-old guy yelling at some kid because he's listening to the Beatles.
The one thing I've kind of had to accept, I just turned 60, is it's not my world anymore.
Yeah.
It just I mean, I'm irrelevant. Most people 20 and under don't even see me. I could bump into them on the sidewalk and they wouldn't see me.
Yeah.
And
And all the statisticians really don't give a shit about us either.
no.
So,
No.
except for the insurance companies.
Sure. Yeah, so I just kind of, sometimes I'll see something on TV, and maybe I won't like it, but it's okay because I'm not the target audience. So
Yeah.
it's cool.
Yeah.
I got plenty of stuff to listen to. I'll never run out of stuff to listen to, so the kids can have their
But I'll
stuff.
play KCRW. I'll put it on
Uh-huh.
and just play it in the morning when it's a solid music block.
Right.
Morning becomes eclectic from
Mhm.
9 to noon. And I like it. There's a lot of stuff, new music.
Right.
I'm not sure who listens to KCRW. I'm sure the people who buy Ariana Grande
Probably
don't
not.
listen to KCRW, but I think the music's really good.
See, I think there's just as much good music now as there ever has been, and maybe even
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
The problem is there's so much of it out there that you may never hear your favorite band.
That's right.
I mean, my favorite band, I keep thinking my favorite band in the world is out there somewhere,
Yeah.
and I haven't heard them. I haven't heard them yet, and I might never because there's 100 bands in line before them I got to listen to.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff I listen to has sort of a retro sound. I mean, there's the new stuff that I listen to has roots very firmly based in what I like.
Yeah.
But I have no trouble finding music that I like. No trouble at all.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah. I will.
And it's
I
funny,
will
you
die
kind of
before
go
I get
from, you
all
hop around, I'll go to Pitchfork and I'll see what they think are the best new releases.
Right.
And, there'll be something in there that I like.
I would highly suggest if you're just sitting around one day, look up this new album by the Yum Yums, and look up a new album by a band called the Explorers Club.
Explorers.
I would suggest both of those. This
Yum
guy, the
Yums.
guy in the Explorers Club, I think he might be Satan, because I don't know how he does it, but like he'll put out an album, he'll go, well, this is my Beach Boys record, and you listen to it and you are convinced that it is the Beach Boys. It is so close, but the songs aren't ripped off from other things. They actually sound like this guy wrote them because he did. So this guy could. And the next album he did was kind of like a Herb Albert, a Tijuana Brass type record, which I thought I was like, yeah, I don't know. I put it on. I'm like, damn, this is really good. Well, he just put out one this past year that is in sort of a fight with the Yum Yums as my favorite album of the year.
Really?
Yes.
So what's it like?
The Yum Yums?
No,
the Explorers Club?
Yeah. So
It kinda
this
runs
new
the
album,
gamut.
is he ripping off the Yum Yums?
No. This new album, he's ripping off a lot of other folks. It's kind of more all over the place rather than a
focused
theme.
on.
But the Yum
This
Yums.
isn't his Kinks album.
No, the Yum Yums sound if sound like if the Ramones had melded with Edison Lighthouse. Does that, I mean,
Okay.
the songs are really fast and they're really loud, but the hooks, you only need to hear them once, right?
Sure.
And they just, you're hooked. You're like a fish. Yeah. And
Edison Lighthouse,
there's some fat guy that
or
the
Explorers
Ramones
Club,
yeah.
and the Yum Yums.
Yeah, the Yum Yums are just dudes from Sweden. They're all probably in our age range. They've been putting out albums for like 20 years. They had one song that I begged Dale to cover. I said, Dale, these guys in Sweden have written a Volker Boatman song. You should just go ahead and do it. And it's called, look it up, it's called Number One. And you'll hear it, and you will immediately go, oh damn, Dale should have done that. You'll hear it immediately. It sounds just like a Volker Boatman song. So, well, all right. Now it's almost 2 hours.
Oh, I had fun.
Yeah, well, that's what I like. I like people to have fun doing it. You know, I like to keep it casual and kind of yacky, and that way, you know, I don't want to be too serious about anything. Yeah. I think we're good.
It was fun, Tony.
Hey, everybody, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.
The wrecking